To Operations and Monitoring Committee for today. We've got a pretty robust agenda coming up with some highlights being the report on the Amarana Reserve, which has been out for consultation probably 18 months, 2 years, finally come to fruition. Before I call for apologies, I'd just like to advise that we are live streaming, and also I'm probably one of the worst culprits, just a friendly reminder to turn your microphone off, because your private conversations are heard quite clearly, my daughter tells me, on the live streaming. Also the mobile phones, same rule applies, turn them off, and if you want a break or want to leave the meeting to a clear and urgent message, you're most welcome to. So far we've got apologies from Councillor Kent and Councillor Hunt. Councillor Rotorua Tate is on council business in Australia. Would someone like to move that those three apologies be accepted? Move Councillor Maxwell, seconded Councillor Kumar. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest that any member wishes to declare? Yes, Your Worship. It's
not a declaration of interest, but I'll be leaving the meeting to go to the New Zealand Tourism Awards tonight, where we've got 2 finalists from Rotorua.
Oh, excellent. Oh, well, whoever the nominees, wish them the best, and I'm sure you'll be celebrating. Rotorua is renowned for getting awards. Christchurch,
and 2 finalists are Kaitiaki Tours and the walk, Bruce Thomason's air walk.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Your Worship. Anyone else want to declare an interest or tell me that you're going to be leaving the meeting early? Okay, good. All right. Third item is the urgent items not on the agenda. Do we have any items? We don't have any items? Oh, excellent. All right. We'll move to the confirmation of the minutes on page 6 of the previous meeting, which was held on the 2nd of August 2018. I've got a motion that the minutes, the Operation and Monitoring Committee held on the 2nd of August 2018 being confirmed as a true and correct record. Moved Councillor Gould, seconded Mr. Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. I think one of the highlights of those minutes was the Crankworks presentation and the positive outcomes that have come from that now internationally recognised event. And I did manage to watch the Crankworks that was held in Canada just recently, and the reference to the Rotorua Crankworks was profound. They were mentioning it quite often, so there is a flow-on effect. Councillor Kumar, on the minutes.
Oh, thank you, Chairperson. I don't know if I should have raised this in urgent, but I was a bit want to know if maybe later if there's a report coming from Stavros regarding infrastructure and roading. It was about that logging accident at the Hemo Gorge last Friday.
Oh, I think we did get an email regarding, I've seen something about it with regard to New Zealand Transport, who are who manage the roundabout, and Stavros will give us a full. Are you happy with that, Stavros? Sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have a mover and a seconded that the report of the operation report for July-August 2018 be received. Moved Councillor Gould, seconded Councillor Tapsell. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Our first report will be from our Kai Whakahaere Māori Gina Rangi, and there's a little gift in front of you today, which I'm sure you'll all find handy and use in your homes and your workplace, and Gina will tell us a little bit more about that when she comes up. Welcome, Gina, and of course Monty Morrison. Welcome.
Morena.
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 Tērā we.
Morena e hene.
Morena. Good morning, councillors. Kia ora tātou. I'm going to start the presentation with a little bit of a deviation from what's in your pack. As you may know, next week is National Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori, Māori Language Week, and because of our commitment to Rotorua Reo, we've really put together a very exciting program, which has brought together a number of agencies from throughout the community. There is a showing of the Moana movie in Te Reo Māori for our toddlers. There's a parade on Sunday next week. So as well as all of these community events, which are described or summarised in your report, we've also got 2 initiatives within Council to strengthen what we already do. We already have a number of initiatives within Council to support our staff to use and learn Te Reo Māori. But we decided to put together, you'll see these little card packs. They're just a little, I guess, memento to encourage staff to use te reo in everyday life. So there's a number of phrases in there. These are designed for people who have no Māori language proficiency. So they're not designed for those of our staff who are already competent, capable or fluent users. But there are a number of phrases and words that are relevant to staff. For example, he tika tau, meaning yes, you're right. Another important one for staff to know is mō taku he, my mistake. But it's really just something to encourage people to use te reo Māori in everyday life. You don't need to be fluent. The important thing about Māori Language Week is that we encourage everyone to use it and to practice. If we're not practicing, then we're not using it, and that's the worst thing for te reo. Really, everything we do in Council is about encouraging everyone to use it. It's not something that's reserved for only those who are fluent and experts. It's actually for children, it's for families, it's for everyday use. So that's the first thing. The second thing is last year, I don't have the clicker. Last year we were asked by staff and management to think about bilingual job titles. So we've taken quite a bit of time to talk to members of the Māori language community, to talk to staff internally about what they would like the job titles to reflect. Rather than doing a direct translation of words, which would often be transliterations, thank you, Monty, we have instead looked at the purpose of the job, the function of the job, and where it's placed within Council, and we're using the metaphor of manu and waka. So a waka is a seafaring boat, which all of your staff, Council staff, are on a voyage together, and the manu are an important navigational aspect of guiding the waka. So, you'll see that we have there some imagery of the manu and waka metaphor. So you'll be familiar that we've often used the word manukura to describe our mea. Manu matarai are the councillors. So together you form the navigation, the navigators, the ones that guide the way for the council. Toi Hautu is our CEO, so the principal navigator on the waka. Group managers sit below the CE. They are te mana hautu. And then we've thought about the types of roles. So within a waka, you have your people who steer, a fugleman, which I'm told are the people who keep time, the bailers, people who bail us out, and kaya, the callers, the ones who coordinate and tell people what to be doing, and then kaihui, which is the people who actually move the waka forward. So we've used that imagery, toi hautu CE, mana hautu group manager, kai hautu manager, kaya, which you remember were the ones who call out the commands to people, coordinators, tiheru, which was the bailers, the people who make sure that the waka is driving forward and not kind of getting bogged down, are our administrators, people within those types of roles. Kai urungi are team leaders, so they're the ones who keep time. And pukenga, which means specialist or expert. So we've taken all of those general roles and applied those across the organisation. And next week, when we launch the job titles, all of our staff will be able to go onto the internal website and see what their specific role is according to the translations. So as I said, the job titles reflect the position with the council and the group instead of a direct translation of function. As a rule of thumb, we've ensured that there are no more than 3 words within each job title. In English, many of the job titles are sort of 3, 4, 5 words long. But we've tried to keep the Māori translations to no more than 3 words. We're still discussing an appropriate translation for Deputy Mayor and the community boards, but those will be rolled out shortly, hopefully by next week. So this is an example of the email tags that we might send out. We probably don't need the English anymore. People know what a phone number is, they know what an email is. So in terms of the normalisation, we'll probably just have the Māori word. But of course, people can have the English translation if they wish. In terms of the launch, we will announce them formally on Monday and make sure that everyone has access to know what their particular job title is. We will also have the email templates available so people can change over immediately. We won't be doing a whole round of business cards, but as people replace them, we will bring in the Māori language job titles as well. So that's just a little something for internally marking Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori in addition to the public program that we run.
Happy to answer any questions. Use your wish.
Pai. And the bit that I miss is when we're trying to write emails, there's no macrons.
We do have macrons. It is a little bit, it's not easy or intuitive. If you go up to insert, you can do it as a symbol and it should come up with all of the macron letters there.
Because I have been criticised for not using them, which means that people are reading and watching where we're going. And I think this is very encouraging. It's just the next step. It's wonderful.
The macronymus is the one that goes above the last A in Nongata Ha.
So maybe we need to do a little tutorial on how to put macrons in emails.
Think so.
Yep, no problems. We can do that.
Well, there you go.
Nothing for me to report.
Any other questions of the Kai Whakahaere Māori?
So just turning to my regular report on page 12 of your board pack. As you know, we carry out a range of technical advice across all of the council functions. Most of our work is reported in the body of the other teams' reports, which we work closely alongside them. I just wanted to note the work that we're doing around the lakefront development and also whakarewarewa. There's still a lot of work to be done to secure support from people. I feel that we're talking to all the right people. We don't necessarily have everybody ready to confirm where they sit within the consultation framework for those initiatives, but we're talking to everybody, and I think there's a great deal of goodwill to continue with the participation. We've had a number of direct discussions with the organisations listed in my report, and on the whole those have been really positive. In terms of the Te Haerenga Bicultural Development Program, I just wanted to point out we have our regular noho marae coming up in 2 weeks' time. We are always really encouraging of councillors and community board members who might want to attend to come along. Often our staff, although they are supportive of working in a bicultural organisation, they don't necessarily have the background of having been on a marae, and it can be quite an intimidating thing if you've never been there. So the Noho Marae program is really to give people a safe opportunity to come along, to learn a little bit about the protocols and to have that experience. And we always have people saying, I was a little bit anxious about going beforehand, I didn't know what to expect, and coming back really enjoying the experience. So if there are any councillors that would like to come along, we'd really like to have your involvement.
Gina, could you put out an email with the date and time and
Yes.
location, and those who want to come, I'm sure, will avail themselves.
Ka pai. And I've already spoken about Rotorua Rotorua, which is the last matter on my report. Are there any questions?
You mentioned regarding the signage unveiling.
10 o'clock on Monday. Yeah, that's set for 10 o'clock on Monday, out at Whakarewarewa, out at Te Puia, I think, is the actual venue. But yes, that's set for 10 o'clock Monday.
Involves Monty, please?
Actually, I don't have the detail yet, but perhaps Te Tato might have the more detailed information, because they'll be working pretty much with them. Councillor Donaldson, perhaps.
I was going to ask about, seek clarification on that one. So the pānui that came out last night was for 9:25 arrival for a 9:30 unveiling, and at the southern entrance, so Te Puia are offering their top car park for parking. But I'm wondering whether it's further south up towards the Waharoa. I'm not sure exactly where we head to, whether to bring gumboots or what. So
Always bring gumboots.
Could you find that out and
Yes, we
email,
can.
send a generic email out to us? Okay, thank you. Councillor Bentley?
Thank you, Chairperson. Just putting on your other hat, Gina, I see that you're spokesman for the council with regard to this homeless issue, and there's a little bit of negative comment in the newspaper this morning. Do you have any comment as to the plans for the future as to making sure that the public are not feeling threatened and so forth with regard to this facility?
We've had one report or one formal complaint, and ever since then we've been working closely with the business owners in that area. On the one hand, it's really important that people feel safe across the whole of the city. On the other hand, can't move people along from a public place when they're just sitting there. And I know that while some people might not like to see people, just hanging around in the central city, there's nothing you can do to discourage people from doing that other than making sure that, our guardians are talking to people. There is security on at MSD, and, which is very close to where the shelter is. The shelter itself has security on as well. So we're doing everything we can to try and create an atmosphere where people are welcomed and treated well and respectfully.
I'll also speak to that, in that I've met the District Commander, Anaru Pawharanga, yesterday. This was one of our points of discussion, and they are working as part of the whole collective with us. So those issues are well known and managed, and I think it's right, Gina, that you say public safety must come first.
Councillor Donaldson?
yeah, I'm not sure through you, Mr. Chair, whether it's the Chief Executive or Henry who could clarify, but the homeless shelter is not a council initiative. It's not run by council.
That's right.
We assist with it. And so it's an operation governed by a trust, and I'm not sure if if antisocial behaviour was linked back to the homeless shelter, what council's powers were, regulatory powers were, if any. So I'd just like to have it quite clear out there where council stands in respect of the homeless shelter.
Councillor Bentley?
Thank you, Chairperson. If memory serves me correctly, one of the main reasons that this council decided to remove the city focus was to get away from having the congregation of undesirable people around the old city focus as it was. So I'm sure that we have learnt from that, and now we have facilities in place which can move these people on, or do we have to change the streetscape to cater for that sort of requirement?
At this stage, it's not at that level. Certainly, I was down there yesterday. I had a meeting at MSD, and I didn't see anything untoward. I actually didn't see anyone other than people who are going about their business and visiting the businesses that were there. On occasion, if there is an issue, we do have the City Guardians. There is security at MSD. I understand there's also security provided at the overnight shelter. And of course the police as well. So at this stage, it's although there's a little bit of commentary, we're working with the businesses and we're satisfied that there are plans in place to keep people safe in that area. The other thing I would note is that you'll recall that funding was announced from central government for the Housing First initiative earlier this year. We understand that that's close to being finalised. The Housing First initiative is designed to deal with the toughest end of homelessness. It's the people who have multiple complex needs. That's really the long-term solution, because it's getting people into homes and providing complete wraparound services to keep them in homes. Everything else that we do is really short-term fix. But the Housing First initiative is really what's going to be the major solution for this community.
Thank you, Councillor Bendy. Councillor Kumar?
Thank you, Chairperson. I've got a couple of things that I want to talk about. One was being this a year on from when Terrio was launched right over here by the Minister then, Te Ruroflevel. He mentioned that that day that if someone wanted to speak Terrio, they would wear some sort of a bear or sticker or something. A year on, has anything like that rolled out, or is there anything?
Yes, there is, and I'm not wearing mine today. Neither is one of our translators. We do have the badges available, and there's two levels of badges. There's the silver badge, which says "Speak Māori to me, practice on me, I'm open to it," and then the red ones signify someone who's fluent and is able to really engage at that level. Again, the idea is everybody to practice, no matter where you're at.
Yeah. Sterling. My other question is in support of, well, not in support, is about the homeless issue that's come in the papers today. And being in business, I think it's sometimes hard, but I don't know, like from the council's point of view, damn if you do, damn if you don't, you know? And I think the council's taken some positive steps in trying to do that. But they were already moved from, was it Rotorua Street to this new place. And in 1 month, I can't understand how it could have had such an impact on that business that it's shut them down. I do feel sorry for the business. Being in business, there are a lot of factors that do affect it. But I wouldn't know if solely this, you know, so where do you take them? Where do you take these people? These are the people of our community. We need to work with them. We need to make them feel that they have the right to be in the city, whether they are desirable, undesirable, or whatever, you know. They're not a stigma. So I think I do feel I have empathy for them, and I hope we can work towards that, and whether Daily Post had done accurate reporting on this, to just throw it up on the front page and say, hey, that this 1 month of them being there has shut this business down.
Thank you for that, Raj. I don't think there's a question in there, but some very, very good comments. Just one thing I want to acknowledge, Gina, from your point of view and Rosemary's point of view, is the hours of work that you and Rosemary have put in to attack this problem head on, and trying to get the different agencies together to work in harmony to get the result that we've got, where Tiny Dean and his volunteers are providing the service in our community. I understand council's put a considerable amount of resource, not a hell of a lot of kudos or thank you, but a hell of a lot of resource into what is ostensibly, and I agree with Councillor Kumar, isn't a Rotorua District Council issue, a problem, but these people are members of our community and we needed to step up. So can you just pass on the committee's thanks I'm passing it on to yourself and to Rosemary for the tireless efforts you've gone to behind the scenes without much thanks, with a lot of criticism in trying to bring the issue together, which you've done in 6 months, which others have failed to do in 30 years.
Yeah, I think I'd also like to acknowledge that there have been a number of staff across the council in our planning and consenting team also have been really supportive. Arashlena and has been in almost daily contact with Visions and also with a number of other organisations. So it's an important issue. It's a community issue.
So it's been a team effort. Okay, thank you. Councillor Maxwell?
Oh, yeah. Tēnā koe te tiamana, tēnā kōrua. Pātai that I have, question that I have is around your last bullet point there, Te Aroha lecture series. I thought that was excellent having Andrew Judd here, and it's good to have people like him come and doing presentations. And also, I went to also another presentation that Lizzie Marvley gave at Te Aka Māori over there at the library. What I do want to ask is, there is another beautiful venue for presentations because you've got the slides at the back and even in this room. So for future Te Aroha lectures or any people, good people like Andrew Judd and Lizzie and them, there's two good venues I think that we could use. Have you given that some thought?
That's a really good point. I'll take that back. Generally, the Te Aroha lectures are primarily designed for staff to raise staff awareness around particular issues. So we've had this year, we've had lectures on what is mana whenua. So mostly it's designed to increase staff awareness and to really hear from some of our Te Aroha experts. But on occasion we do have things that we know are going to have wider appeal, like the one from Mr. Judd, and we would absolutely consider other venues.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gina Monti, for your report. Now we'll move to JP on the strategy group on page 13. And as you can see in the report, and thank you, JP, for detailing the lakefront development, because there's been a whole lot of misinformation out there in the community and absolute garbage, to be frank. And to see the previous report from Kai Whakahaere Māori in terms of the lakefront consultation, and yours from a managerial point of view from the whole of the district, and the detail you've put there is excellent. So you'd just like to go through your report and highlight any items that you feel we need updating on further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that comment about the work Gina and the team have done. So there's a lot of ongoing discussions, not only with Hini Mutu and other stakeholders, but also some of the operators down on the lakefront. So that's very important as we move through the reserve management plan process over the next month and a half. Councillors, just a couple of things that weren't included within my report, so I'll take this as read. And just a note that there is a presentation coming up later in the operational section on Sanatorium Reserve. So obviously that's a quite important piece within the ring of reserves that we're developing. So from Kueroa Park, lakefront, through Government Gardens, and obviously out towards the forest through Sanatorium. So there's a bit of a presentation later on about the Sanatorium restoration work. Just two other things. So what's not included here is a reference to the work that Una Thomas and myself are undertaking around preparing for the rates review, so the workshops for councillors, but also the content of the material for the focus groups. So that process is underway, and we're working hard on that over the next few weeks. And probably one other one which has just come to my attention, which I wouldn't mind just dropping in, was that Te Aka Māori is up for an architectural award up in Auckland. So it's in the Best Design Awards 2018, so it's a finalist in one of the categories there, put forward by the architectural firm GHD Woodhead, who did the design work for us. So that'll be announced on the 22nd of September. So very pleased that the architectural firm felt it was a project worth putting forward for an award, and obviously it's made the finals for that evening. So happy to answer any other questions.
JP, I have had a couple of queries, and thank you for raising the rates review, that there's quite a clear distinction between the workshops, which are for council awareness and understanding of the complex issue of rates. But the focus group, is that where there are different sectors within our community that have been individually targeted? And where does Joe Public, where does Mrs. Smith in Sunset Road, who isn't part of RDRRs, isn't part of Federated Farmers or the local ratepayers groups, where does she get an opportunity to come in and talk with the focus groups? Because I understand there's a lot out in the community. First, you want to understand the rates and the permutations of the different aspects of rates, which you and I know are many and varied. So just wondered if you'd like to comment on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll just get Una to add anything about the process, but you're absolutely correct. The opportunity we're putting forward is for people to nominate themselves and indicate their interest in being part of our focus group, and so we'll collect a little bit of information about what kind of category they fit into. Are they a homeowner, are they a business owner, farming, rural residential? So all of those sectors are quite important for us, so we need to sort of get that information from them, and then we can use that to put together the focus groups. So Una can just give us a bit more detail about that.
Well, I think JP has covered it off there quite nicely. Just one further point on that is that our expressions of interest, or a call to action out to our community, is expected to go out via a number of council channels, so Facebook, existing databases that we have with people who have previously submitted via annual plans or long-term plans. We've got a number of groups that we work with and have contact details with. So we will be sending out, along with adverts in that, community newsletters that call for action and trying to enlist, I suppose, as many people who wish to be a part of this to be involved. And so that will go out from early next week, we're hoping.
Are there any questions on the content of JP? Oh, Councillor, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to concur with what you're saying and support that. Being involved with the community out at Ngātaha, I feel the pressure being put on myself and from people coming in on the lower echelon of rates and their capital values. I personally feel they've had a hammering this round, and I'm not afraid to say that. They are very reluctant to just talk. They feel let down, and it's quite serious out there. And if you have a look at it, it's the greater amount of money has been collected from those lower properties. I had a lady say to me the other day, "Isn't it bloody peculiar?" And she swore at me. She said, "It's costing me $5 more per week for rates than what it is for my health insurance." And that really hit home to me. And then she went through other things as well. And her budget has been blown out. So, Mr. Chairman, I do endorse what you're saying. I think there's councillors, and I say to you councillors around this table, you people have got to get out and start talking to those people that don't normally want to talk to you. So please do it.
Point of order, Your Worship.
Exception to that, and I'd like the member to withdraw that remark. We are out every day and every night of the week, and the public are talking to us. It's really wrong at this table to put that challenge to councillors and your colleagues that we need to get out there. We don't sit in ivory towers. Mr. Martin, we are talking to people that live in every part of our community, so I take exception to that remark.
I don't think it is a point of order. I think you're making a general statement that on this particular issue that that councillors need to, and I think we've also said it in our own discussions, Your Worship, that councillors, because we've set up these workshops, that councillors owed the right to attend those, to become fully aware and to own whatever review we come up with, bearing in mind the opportunity, Mr. Martin, that was the basis of my question, is how can the public, Mrs. Smith and Sunset Road, get engaged in the process, which is the focus groups? But I do support, Your Worship, that each and every one of us, whether it's fundraising or sport or focus groups or business groups or whatever, we're out with our community. In our community, that's one thing Rotorua people aren't shy about, is coming up and expressing their views. But your point is taken, and I don't think it needs to be withdrawn, but Her Worship took the view that you're insinuating that we aren't getting out and talking. So there's a message there that you believe we should, and we take that on board.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I would not be withdrawing it because it's the truth.
Okay, Councillor Maxwell?
Point.
Yes, Your Worship.
Raising a point.
Is actually saying, I'm not comfortable with the comments made and I would like them to be withdrawn and an apology. It's not just myself, it's other councillors, and when we're seen to take that criticism from one within our team, it's not a good look.
What's Mr. Martin's court?
Mr. Chairman, I asked the question then. There's been one exception of councillors that have come out to our meetings out at Nongatai. How many of you people that are councillors have actually attended a meeting, public meeting in Nongataha in the last 12 months?
Point.
Your Worship.
This is not a roll call about where we go. We've been actively hands-on involved in all aspects, including the floods at Nongataha. It doesn't mean in other capacities, attendance at a public meeting gives you a tick. I take exception to the remark and I'd like you to apologise.
Yeah, I think there's validity in both points. I don't want a across-the-table disagreement. I'm not going to say you've got a valid point of order, Your Worship, because there is validity in both of what you're saying, is that in some instances, Mr. Martin's recognised that there has not been public engagement. On your point, we engage every day of the week. So I just think we leave it there and we move on. Councillor Maxwell, did you have your hand up? Oh, okay. Anyone else? Oh, Councillor Gould. Councillor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the focus groups and the workshops coming up in the next 3 meetings, are community groups from Fordlands and Kotu going to be invited to those, please?
Have you got a contact in terms of that, JP?
Mr. Chair, as Una has detailed, and I've tried to detail as well, and we've repeated this before, we're not inviting individuals, we are asking people to nominate themselves to come forward to participate in the focus groups. We will be putting out information through all of our channels to encourage people from different parts of our community to put their hands up and take part in a group.
Not specifically targeting
so we're not going to go and shoulder tap people. That's we're trying to, and this is your point about the resident in Sunset. This is how they have their opportunity to participate by putting themselves forward, not for us to go through the usual channels of picking groups or individuals that we have interactions with. So this is that wider discovery phase we're trying to achieve.
Councillor Gould? You happy with that answer? Okay. Thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Gaston, with regard to the lakefront redevelopment, I see that you have submitted a claim to the central government for the Provincial Growth Fund for 19.9 million and another one for the Waka Forest for 7.5 million. Has this council got a contingency plan if they're not successful in gaining funding from these two applications?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it was quite clear the direction that Council gave us through the long-term plan process. Council put in place the match funding with the view that we were seeking these grants from central government, so match funding. That is what has been consulted on, and that is what's the basis of the long-term plan. If we are unsuccessful in any way, it must come back here, and you would be making a decision as to what steps or what changes should be done, or if any changes are undertaken.
Thank you. Further to that, have we had any indication of monetary contributions from the likes of Rotorua Whata with regard to the lakefront development?
Not quite clear as to the question. We have a number of private owning properties adjacent to the lakefront, and we've highlighted those, and a number of them are actually part of what was Project Palace, now Project HAP, where central government has sought to support local owners to undertake developments, but there is private footprints adjacent to the reserve. So are you saying that private developers who are adjacent should be contributing onto the reserve?
If it is going to be to their advantage, yes.
Okay, that's his point, Your Worship.
It's interesting, isn't it, with our Vision 2030, where we've talked about partnerships being the key to unlocking our economic future, and these big moves, that some of us around the table don't understand what we mean when we say a partnership. If we don't get the partnership funding, it's always been very clear it doesn't happen. We've said that with everything. But can I just raise too here that some of us don't get it nationally. And I was on a panel at the Infrastructure Council conference in Auckland where there were huge hitters there. And I was asked to talk about Rotorua Way, the innovative way we're unlocking economic potential here, other than using ratepayer funding. And they wanted particularly to hear about the big moves, because we're seen as very ambitious and very innovative. I wish all councillors really shared that love. The other was speaking last week and opening the Property Council, where I gave a half-an-hour address here to a delegate conference of over 800 international delegates on property, investment and aspirational hope. You can't get a better opportunity than that to talk to an investor group about our aspirational journey. And we're only asked to these things because we've got Vision 2030. It's incredibly exciting. And yet some here say we're overreaching. All we need to do is a bit of a tart-up and stay within an envelope and not look at investing in an aspirational future for our district. I think we've moved on from that. And if you're at those conferences, and if you're at that international table, you understand that people are looking at us from many parts of the world. And you're all part of it. We're all part of that. It's incredibly exciting. It's investment, and it's investment in growth and our future. And well done, JP, for getting our application for both funds, which we all knew about all along. They were discussed at our big workshops as we refreshed the Vision 2030 vision and the Rotorua Way, and councillors were there at those workshops, and community and Te Tato members. Well done for getting that application in on time. I'm really proud of that. I'm aware of the amount of work that's taken, but you've called in the right people to walk beside us on that journey, and we should all be hoping that we get that funding.
I think the basis of Councillor Bentley's question was if we do not secure that funding, and I'm standing right beside you, Your Worship, in the prayer that we do get the funding, that this matter will, as JP has said, will come back to this table and we'll look at other options. But it's just because we've given it the big tick in the LTP doesn't mean to say they bowl ahead. Even if we don't get that funding. But as you say, Your Worship, it is aspirational, and we're all hoping that the government has the same feeling of aspiration that we have, so that we can get on and make the investment in Rotorua that we're craving out for. Any other questions on JP's report? Councillor Tapsell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, JP, for your presentation. I completely support Her Worship's comments. In fact, it's a very exciting opportunity, and our community is already asking lots of questions because they're getting excited too, because Rotorua has waited many, many years for that lakefront to be redeveloped. One of the questions the community had, and perhaps if you could just clarify the timeframes, because on our website, the latest lakefront updates are from 2016, so it doesn't include this development. So I've been asked a number of times by a number of people, where can we find information? It sounds very exciting. We want to know how we can give our feedback. So perhaps if you could just clarify the timelines on when we'll start making our discussions and then go up for consultation, and when we anticipate it may be complete.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the lakefront concept has been presented here to you, and I think we obviously need to update some of the information that sits on our website for those who didn't want to watch the meeting and see the presentation. They might just want to see the plan, which has been printed on the front page of the paper. So we need to get that there. But most importantly, the consultation that's happening at the moment is the Reserve Management Plan consultation, which I believe has kicked off. And so we will make sure that certainly the plans are in close proximity to that, so they can see what's been written as the words as far as the amendments to the Reserve Management Plan, to give effect really to our ability to take forward the lakefront concept, subject to funding.
Just over the page on page 14, JP, can you just explain the situation with the business? Oh, it's Thomas, okay. Sorry. Right. Any further questions? There appear to be none. Thank you, JP. Oh, Councillor Kuma, you have a comment or a question?
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
Mr.
Chairperson. Yeah, I support the lakefront project. I think it's exciting times ahead for Rotorua City. I would have liked to see a few more food precincts out there. Some lovely restaurants as well added to that, but I think the way it's going, it's going to open up a whole new ball game for Rotorua as a good waterfront space.
Tēnā koe, te tia mana o tira, tēnā tātou katoa, kia ora JP. It's just a point of clarification, that's all. I just want to make a point that Pukeroa Rua Whata Trust are investing heavily, and it may not be directly in the project, but we are in the process of putting something there that probably is going to become the feature of that lakefront. So I just wanted to put it out there that koira te kaupapa. Kia ora.
Thank you, Mr. Waru. Thank you, JP. We now move to page 14, the infrastructure group, which is Stavros's report, and I hope that members, when they got their agendas and read through them prior to coming to the meeting, appreciate the format that both Stavros and Rob Keithley are now producing in our report, stating what...
Sorry. A clarification. A councillor's left the table.
Yes.
With his cell phone, whereas all of us leave our phones here. I wonder if, when the councillor returns, he could be reminded that we're not to use our cell phones during a meeting. It's becoming a habit after every contentious debate. Okay. And one does wonder who the contact is that he's ringing. I just feel uncomfortable with that when all of us leave our phones here and don't leave to make phone calls during the meeting.
Yeah. I did say at the beginning of the meeting that if there was an urgent item, they could leave the meeting, but we would adjourn, and I'm going to have a break at 11 o'clock so that people can either refresh themselves or catch up on emails. I mean, like you and I, like everyone around this table, we get hundreds and hundreds of them a day, not only on council matters, but all other things too. So the point's well made. Thank you. Okay, I'll just go back where I was midstream and just pointing out the appreciation of us as elected representatives, Stavros, to the format that you and Rob Keithley are now putting in our reports in terms of giving us a brief update on what the capital projects are, what work you got currently on, what's coming up. You know, for example, I get phone calls about reseals. I can go straight to my laptop on my iPad and say, right, we're doing such and such and such and such. So Thank you for that. And we take a report as read. Are there any matters that you wish to highlight in terms of topical items like rubbish dumping and that's going on at the moment?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'll take the report as written. I do have 3 or 4 items I would like to talk a little bit about them because I think they're quite important for the council and something that is not in this report. This week we just completed about 4 days of intensive financial, technical, procurement and procedural audit by the New Zealand Transport Agency with regards to the funding support we get from that agency every year. I think it's quite important for elected members to refresh their minds in terms of the fact that we receive from NZTA somewhere between $6 and $9 million a year in terms of funding assistance for our various transport projects. And of course, our ability to faithfully comply with the requirements and the policies of the NZTA in terms of our financial tracking, in terms of our contractual procedures, contract management, record management, procurement processes are very critical to that, to that funding assistance we get every year. It's not coming as of default, it's coming because we're meeting those requirements. Case in point in time, especially for this year, as you know, in April this year, we have incurred somewhere in the region of $6 million of transport infrastructure damage because of the emergency. 72% of that funding will come from NZTA funding assistance, and therefore it was extremely critical that we have met all those requirements on NZTA to be able to secure that kind of funding. And I'm pleased to report that yesterday we had a final debrief with the auditors, and they gave us a tick with some minor works to do, but they were very complimentary about all our activities today. Another area I would like to highlight is that on Tuesday we had a further meeting with a consultation group or the project steering group for the Central Transport Corridor, the Amohau Street, the revocation project, which incorporates members of the Pokiroa Trust, has landowners on either side, members of the business sector, and NZTA officers, and members of the Rotorua Cycling Action Group. We are pleased to report that we have concluded a final consensus on the scope of that project and in terms of the concept. I plan to bring that concept to this council over the next few weeks as a presentation before we start detailed consultation or engagement with the local businesses. So you are fully aware of what it is proposed, the reasons behind it, and how we're going to proceed in that respect. So that was again a process that took a few months, but I think we arrived at a consensus on Tuesday, and I think we are all on the same wavelength. Also would like to advise the committee that on this Friday, tomorrow, the request for a proposal for our wastewater services that includes a construction of a new wastewater treatment plant.
Just take over. Councillor Bentley, you were told before the meeting, and it was raised while you were out of the meeting. Excuse me, I'm raising a point. You were asked not to communicate with your phone during the meeting, that if you wanted a break, to just ask. This has been raised as a point of order, that you seem to be leaving the meeting, and during a debate, especially after a contentious debate, and it's none of our business as to who you're communicating with, but everyone else around the table has put their cell phones up on the table. Mine's in my bag at the back, and there's just general concern as to your behaviour in terms of that. And we just watched you. You were texting whilst the meeting was on, which we've frowned upon. I mean, we're not children, and we're not. I shouldn't even have to mention it, but it has been a process in this whole term of this council that there is some leniency in terms of that. If you want to leave the meeting, please tell me you are, and just don't stand up and walk out.
Mr. Chairperson,
yes,
can I have a right of reply?
Certainly.
Right, my inference, my reason for leaving the meeting is I wanted to go to the toilet. I stopped putting my hand up to ask permission when I was at primary school. With regard to using the phone just then, it comes with a calculator facility. And I'm not sure if Mark noticed, but I was doing a mathematical calculation. Your inference that I'm texting during the meeting, I take umbrage to. I think that you've jumped to the wrong conclusion and you've vocalised that quite forcefully. So I will use my phone for the betterment of my knowledge. I'm not texting, I'm not receiving texts. The fact that I have to go to the toilet occasionally, I don't think should be held as a penalty. And for goodness sake, we moved beyond kindergarten, surely.
That was not the message that I was sending, just that cell phones were a distraction early on in this term. We made a collective decision that they would be turned off and not used during meetings. People either side of you, and certainly members of the public have commented that you have a preference to, you may not have been texting today, you may have been doing a calculation, I've got to accept your word on it, but you seem to be doing a lot of calculation and a lot of over the last term. So I'll just leave it at that. It's just a general reference to everybody. When for the smooth running of the meeting, we're interrupting a staff member simply because someone has raised a point of disgust that we have a rule and why aren't we living with the rule. So I'll just leave it at that and just accept that some people, I'm going to have a break at 11 o'clock as well because I need to go to the toilet, and I certainly won't be putting my hand up either, Councillor Bentley, and I don't think you should either. Stavros, would you like to carry on, please? You were on the Tuesday revocation, the meeting in the Yamaha Street revocation meeting.
Yes, Chair, just very, very briefly, as I said, that the concept has been comprehensively agreed by the project steering group, and I intend to bring that concept to this committee for your information before we start some local engagement and consultation with regards to the details, of that project. Also, I want to sort of let you know that this Friday, the request for proposal for the wastewater services, including the construction of the new wastewater treatment plant, provided our resource consent is granted early in the new calendar year, will close, and officers will be engaged in full detail evaluation with the objective of reaching a recommended preferred supplier for that. And hopefully we'll bring to you this, for recommendation this side of Christmas, if not early in the new, calendar year. The rest of the project, my report is available for you to consider, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
JP, I just have one. I've sent Stavros, I've sent an email to you. There's been quite a bit of discussion within the community about the quality and the degradation of footpaths, and I think it behoves us as elected representatives to remind it of what our policy is regarding that. So I wonder if you could bring forward the next round of meetings the current policy, where it fits, whether you think it's meeting the needs, what criteria there is, etc. Because I'm getting quite a bit of feedback from people in places like Wiley Street, Ohene Mutu, Kotu, etc., saying their curbing and channeling of footpaths have been compromised. I did want to say, though, in reply to some of them, I've said, Dan, I drive down a lot of streets with my other job, and the number of logging trucks, vehicles that are driven up on, and we get reported damage of water pipes and things like that, simply because the infrastructure can't take the weight that has been put on some of these structures. And for example, in the Wiley Street situation, I walked down there, and a lot of the tree roots have made in parts made the concrete buckle, but there are areas in Wiley Street that do need attention. So I just wondered whether we, rather than have a debate here about what we should do about footpaths, we've got an amount of money in the LTP, and I just think that maybe we have a look at that policy at the next round of meetings. Questions? Councillor Gould.
Mr Chair, as a council, I'm concerned with the flooding which happened in April 2018, 2019, and with the comments on page 16, on the top part, background, the funding application has been forwarded to NZTA for approval. NZTA visited the sites recently and working through the funding protocols to include the required agreements. What I'm saying is that are the areas at Ruakākā, Paradise Valley, Ngongata, have they been fixed up, or are they still in the process of being fixed up, or what is the delay, or how much extra time is needed to finish those particular repair jobs?
About 3 specific areas, JP, Ngongata, Paradise Valley and Ruakākā. There's a working party yet to report on Ngongata, is there not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the question is that is the council concerned about the flooding, and of course we are concerned. Council always identifies, we are trying to identify areas of enhanced vulnerability. Just going to remind, perhaps all of us that the 29th of April 18, event was such an event of 1 in 108 years. So it's not an event that we get every day. As the Chair said, the Longotaha Stream flooding review panel is expected to deliver their draft recommendations by the end of September, and at some point in time in October, a report will come to the full council, and hopefully together with the regional council, to receive that report. We are executing a number of emergency works in Ruakākā, as you see in the report, the bridges, the culverts, we're looking into the design works for Tarawera and Paradise Valley. I expect the tenders to be out over the next few days for Tarawera and the additional works in Paradise Valley. We completed the works from 2017 now in Paradise Valley, and we'll continue to work in that area. There are localized areas of concern, and we are executing catchment management plans for stormwater management. And we'll continue to do that. I will have to say that this is going to be an issue, especially stormwater management. That'll be with this council and any other council, all other councils, for a very long time. We have a weather change pattern. We've got intensity of rains, changes. We've got intensification of properties, and that's not. There is no magic solution to that. We'll continue to identify the most critical areas. Our infrastructure strategy identified a method for that, and we'll continue to work from that. NZTAs, as I said earlier, have contacted their procurement and management auditing on us, and they're very happy with our performance. And I expect that they will fund our transportation infrastructure needs for emergency purposes as required. So I'm comfortable we're heading in the right direction. The speed of which it will be defined by other events that might occur to us, and we'll have to reprioritize our priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. Councillor Bentley. Oh, Councillor Gould, you've got a follow-up?
Please.
Sure.
A number of our councillors have got an email from people at Ruakākā. Can you explain the repairs for those particular 2 bridges and culvert? I know the culvert's probably done. What's the length of delays required? Are we talking about a 6-month repair from now, or are we talking about less?
Stavros, if you just detail the length of repair, I think the other issues, if I get questions like that in emails from ratepayers, I'll forward them on to Stavros so he can deal with them direct, rather than waiting for a meeting. But Stavros?
Mr. Chair, the single large culvert has been repaired and the road has been reinstated. The 2 bridges have been affected, it was mainly their abutments, and they required re-armoring, and that work is currently in the process, have been executed. I would expect that work to be finished by mid-October, latest at the end of October. So all these, works are in progress at the moment. We're continuing as fast as we can.
Stavros. Your wish. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Chairperson. Stavros, a couple of questions just regard and a reassurance, if I may, with regard, excuse me, to the resealing that has been going on through various streets in Rotorua, notably round by the stadium, the Tarawera Road and Victoria Street. And the quality of such, I've had more than a few comments from different people that doesn't appear to be quite up to standard. Now, I just want assurance that, first of all, the job is not going to be paid for until the job is satisfactory. And do we have relevant supervisors to the contract to ensure this is happening?
Through Mr. Chair, Councillor Bedley, just last year, as we do every year, we executed somewhere in the region of 65 kilometres of reseals. There are a number of locations where the chip sealing identified, some defects. Devon Street is one. The two corners or two junctions of Fenton and Victoria Street and the runoff and Victoria Streets. And I can go in detail about what's happening there and why. And a couple of other areas. As Councillor Bentley, you know that every contract has got retention monies and it's got defects liability periods, which have been minimum of 12 months. So those areas that have, where defects have been identified, are held, through the retention monies and the expectations for the contractor to go back and rectify any defects identified. So we'll continue with that.
I have to concur with Councillor Bentley. There are 2 or 3 that have been highlighted. Your Worship.
Stavros, just to thank you for alluding to that extra funding that's coming into the Bay of Plenty from NZTA's funding. And for our cycleway network, I see the upgrades that we're doing. How many more have we got till we finish a completely connected district in our cycleway plan?
Your Worship, and again, the intention is to bring to this committee or in October a full update on the Skyway status of the program. But basically over the next few weeks you will see that we'll complete Ranulph and Springfield. The next section that's missing at the moment is connecting from the stadium through Ohinemutu down to the CBD. The CBD revocation, so on the central corridor, will see cycleways coming all the way from Isles Road to Old Tapa Road on both sides of the road, except from the central part between Ranulph and Fenton Street. And we're completing the link to the forest, from Sala to the forest. And then once we've done that work, over the next 12 months, I hope, or 18 months, say, then we'll have to do localized network connections, and we are progressing pretty well on that.
Great, and that funding is included in that 668 million, is it?
Yeah, that funding is there, yeah.
And can I just say, on Saturday, I rode right through town to Tapuia, and it was an absolute delight and very busy.
Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Stavros. Just wanting to know what the length of time is proposition for the intersection development on from Sala Street to Isles Road.
You mean the construction period for that?
Yes, yeah.
The consultants within ZTA are now just trying to put together the final, the design has been completed. They are ready to go to tenders for that. As you are aware, the National Land Transport Programme has been announced by the Minister last week, and the NZTA are trying to sort of make sure that their required funding is in place for that work. The expectation is that if the work is going to start, let's say, this side of Christmas, it will be at least a 12 to 18 months period, or not all, in comparison, it's going to be on a localized basis.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just want to know because that's one of the main arterial routes going out, so just what strategies are going to be put in place to get traffic moving. It's always so congested there, especially in that 2-lane.
Very good question. Mr. Bassani Tule.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Kia ora tātou. Kia ora, Stavros. Just to maybe jumping the gun about the truck and trailer derailment last week at Hemel Beach. Could you give us an update on that, please?
Through Mr. Chair, the reality is that I know what everyone knows. At this point in time, there is an accident investigation undertaken by the police and NZTA's safety team. The reasons for that could be, as we all know, road condition, driver inattention, vehicle condition. I note that the second trailer was tipped over. That's why that the load fell over. But there could be something wrong with the hinge, with the couplings. I'm not sure if there was a problem with the securing of the load. All we're saying is that it was a serious accident, which in a very busy intersection, and obviously together with NZTA, once an outcome is reached as to the possible reasons, any actions might be taken into consideration. What I would say from my perspective, this is a busy node with about 20,000 vehicle movement a day. It's been open for the last 6 to 7 months at the moment, so one can do the maths. I just suspect that the primary reasons for that would be either a driver overspeeding over the conditions or something wrong with the vehicle itself. Otherwise, we would have more accidents on the location more often.
So you're going to wait for the accident report to see whether we need to make it, or NZTA need to make any changes or improvements. Councillor Kuma?
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, I'm not a roading expert, but someone that was behind him all the way from Taupo said he wasn't speeding at all. He was just turning very slowly. But the police reckon, and that's the road police, that the Cambridge on the road is quite tight there, and that's what's contributing for a lot of them. So I don't know, but
that'll come out in the report.
Yeah.
Yeah, I already tell you what I've said. That intersection accommodates 20,000 vehicle movements a day. As I said, if there were, remember the construction was followed by a safety audit, would meant involved in geometrical safety audit too. So I find it extremely unlikely that those kind of, road gradients would not have been taken into consideration there too. So as I said, I will hold my opinion until I get some facts on the table. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, page 18, item 10, please, Stravos. It's been noted that there's a number of subdivisions going to take place above Forest Place, and the council can't supply water because that's above the actual reservoirs, I understand. Is that a council cost or is it a developer's cost?
Stavros?
If I could go back into our LTP, where our infrastructure strategy identified the core requirement that we will evaluate our future development of infrastructure, including water supply, stormwater, sewage, to meet our spatial plan. The particular subdivision up there, will require some pumping at this point in time. But in the future, there will be the need for a larger reservoir for storage to supply all that area. The works that we'll undertake at the moment will be largely paid by what we call financial contributions by the land development up there. In due course, obviously, we incur the upfront cost as part and parcel of our infrastructure, but as lots are developed, we will receive the contribution for that, for the required works.
Mr. Stanton.
Thank you, Chair. On the back of that question, Stavros, can you determine whether there's any recognition to that supply in terms of the possible future connection to West Rotorua, please? Because in the past, we have discussions around water supplies for West Rotorua have centred on the eastern supply. And there have been some indications that there are limitations on that to do so. So it would be of interest to know whether at this stage, if you're looking at extending that water supply, whether there has been any considerations in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I will refer back into our infrastructure strategy and the LTP, which identifies future water supply augmentations. And I think Rotorua area has been identified as one of these areas that will require augmentation and connection. Whether we can connect it through the Linmore area or not is a different story. We are doing at the moment a whole range of forecasting catchment management plans that will identify the most optimum way to connect areas which currently are not serviced by water supply connection. So that area is identified, is in our LTP, is in our infrastructure strategy, and we'll have more details as engineering programs take shape.
Mr. Waru?
Tēnā koe te te amana o tira tātou katoa. Kia ora, Stavros. Hey, I don't know if I've jumped the gun, but I'm referring to point, what is it, page 19. Okay, to buy? Just at the end there, point 4 of, oh well, there's the 7.5 and bullet point number 4, talking about the independent review panel investigating the flood and all that. Just wondering when the final report will be released or when that's being coined to be completed.
Sure. Our current expectations, through Mr. Chair, is that the draft report will be provided to us and the Regional Council towards, I think, after the 20th of September, if I'm not wrong, but around about that time. Officers from the Rotorua Lakes Council and the Regional Council will do a fact-checking to make sure that all the information there is we concur with, and then a presentation is anticipated to be made to both this council and the regional council. Hopefully, we'll try to have a joint presentation at the same time. So sometime middle October, that will be expected to be released, to the councils and then to the public.
Mr. Wari?
All right, Stavros, thank you for that. And just one last question there, referring to page 20, point 7.62. You're talking about the whakarewerua kaupapa there. Just wanted to see if you had an update in regards to the cultural cleansing status and what the general feeling of the iwi is around that, or affected iwi I'm talking about.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. I take it you mean to bullet point out the resource consent? Yeah.
Correct.
Well, as you are aware that, it's been a long process, and obviously we have lodged the resource consent on the 20th of August, to this council and the regional council. The expectation is that both councils will refer that to the Environment Court. And inside that resource consent, the volunteer conditions that we will implement a land conduct system as per culture experts advice and collective work we've done over the years. We are also in contact with the forest owners and managers to say, well, if we need to stay a bit longer than December 19, can we reach a viable agreement to achieve that to mutual satisfaction? So all these areas are progressing as collaboratively and constructively. I think the key issue here is whether there'll be individuals who may feel that the engagement and consultation with regards to conduct system has been to their satisfaction or not, and whether they'll lodge any objections to the Environment Court. I have no way of knowing at this point in time, but time will tell. Thank you.
No, kia ora, Stavros. That's what I was getting at, just to see how the progress was coming. Kia ora. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think this is the beauty of the Te Arawa partnership, Mr. Wari, that before Māori were an afterthought, now they're at the forefront of all consultation, which is where we've experienced, in the 30 years I've been here, that we've had delay after delay after delay because we spoke to the wrong people. I think it's just a huge step forward in our relationship with Te Arawa that they're now the first consideration, and no hold-ups seem to occur. Process takes its due course. So thank you for your report, Stavros. We appreciate your hard work, and you've got a lot on your plate. I'd now like to call on Henry Weston regarding the Operations Group report. That's at the halfway down the page 20, starts with the animal control and a comprehensive report there. Henry, we'll take your report as read if you'd like to highlight any matters. I know there are a couple of presentations coming up, which I'm quite excited about, so we'll leave it with you. Thanks, Henry. Welcome.
Kia ora, Mr Chair, and kia ora koutou councillors and board members. And look, as you say, we do have 2 or 3 presentations coming which will just cover a few of these areas in a bit more detail, so we'll hold off on those till the presentations happen. Just flicking through, probably the few things I want to highlight were, and again, we're carrying on with what we started last month in terms of just trying to give you a little bit of a snapshot from the Community and Regulatory Services group, that's Nevin Hill's group, about the work that they do on a day-to-day basis, and this month we're highlighting the work of the Animal Control Group, and really just to give you a bit of a picture of the scale of the work they undertake on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And you'll see from the little graph, really they're responding to round about 500 incidents every month, and generally speaking, the approval rating for their work is really high. And the work ranges from the relatively straightforward to the really difficult, and particularly seizure kind of actions which involve a lot of emotion and tension. And also just want to give you a picture, just again, so you can see just a bit of the capital work going on in that area, which is around the upgrade and the extension to the pound. And this is really much needed work in terms of just increasing capacity, but also lifting the standard of what we provide out there. So again, open invitation to any councillor who does want to get out there at any time and just see that facility. I suspect it's a bit of an unknown to a number of you. Yes. Consenting activity again, on the basis that this is really month 1 of the new year. I don't think there's anything particularly to highlight in there unless you want to jump in with any questions. Shimpack, again, one of the major projects going on, and there's just a bit of a snapshot of the work that's happened and the work that's coming up. And obviously there's a massive amount of work going on in terms of funding and seeking funding, and that continues to track pretty well. And then I think flicking through, probably I'd highlight the work going on in the EEC. Again, they're carrying a lot of the load from the closure of Shimpack in particular, and a lot of the feedback we're getting at the moment from users is just a huge credit to Jolene and her team. They're getting massively impressive feedback for what they're doing over there. So that's really good to see. And just a reminder again, coming up, we've got the Tall Blacks game against Lebanon in just over a week. So again, it'd be great to see a number of you there.
I wonder, Henry, at this stage, if Stuart could join you, because I know there'll be a few questions regarding Shimpack. And yeah, carry on. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And we've got Rob, who can also cover questions in terms of the sport, recreation, environment portfolio. So look, I'm happy to open it up for questions.
Any questions up to the end of education on page 27, and that covers the museum, which welcomes Stuart to the team, and it also covers the Shimpack. I feel this is a comprehensive update on where we're at in terms of both, and if not monthly, Henry, with written reports, maybe an update each month, because we are getting considerable political pressure on where we're at in terms of Shimpack and with the we'll do that presentation shortly. Do you want to do the presentation first, Stuart, or answer any questions on your report first?
Aina Rangatira, tēnā koutou kata. Look, I'm happy to take questions first, and I can do the presentation, I think.
With animal control, Mr Chair. On page 20, you've got indicating that you're 25 pens this year. When is it going to be operational? Is it going to take just a month or a couple of months, or is it going to be next year? Or is it over a gradual period of time?
It's a good question. I want to say confidently by the end of this year, by the end of this calendar year. I'm sure Nevin will jump in and correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Thank you, Chairperson. I've got two questions, please, for Henry. Who's replaced Kevin Cootes? Or has he been replaced yet?
Oh, yes, he has. One of the team members has stepped up into the role, Dylan Wright, who was effectively Kevin's 2IC. So it's awesome to see it coming from within, and he's doing great.
Oh, that's good news. The other one is that with regard to the farmers market, I see that you've had several cancellations this winter, but you made a decision to pursue the marketing of this throughout the winter, and I'm just wondering, are we still, when it is cancelled, do we still incur costs? Because it's fairly well known that it's not making money, and it's just being subsidised by the ratepayer.
Before you answer that, Henry, was it set up to make money? Can you answer that question?
Look, the way we pitched it and portrayed it was really as an investment into the activation of the city, but you know, with the hope that over time it would build and you know would start generating income.
Yeah, sure. Look, when the market is cancelled, we do incur obviously those ongoing marketing costs regardless, and there are some minimal operational costs, but otherwise they're fairly minimal.
Do cancel it though, Stuart. It's normally the day before or the night before, isn't it, if the weather's inclement? They do give the market operators a little bit of notice. At least try to give 24 hours notice.
Yes, we do with the Sunday market, and then with the Thursday market, for instance, that's around about 11 o'clock. Today we'll make that decision based on weather forecast.
Thank you. Councillor Kumar, did you have your hand up? Oh, okay. Mr. Wadu, followed by Mr. Donaldson.
Tēnā koe te tiamana, o tira, tēnā kōrua, Henry, Stuart. Tēnā koe I tā kōrua reporter, thanks for the report. Just wanted to point out something, anyway, page 27, I think it was. I just want to make mention that I really like the inclusion of the Māori themes, ngā kaupapa Māori, as business as usual. That's what I'm reading it as. It seems like it's part and parcel of what they do. Tino pai te rā kia, and I hope it continues. Secondly, on to reference to page 30, what was it? Am I going too far?
You're jumping again.
Okay, no, kai te pai. I'll wait for the presentation. Thank you.
Wait for Rob Ketley. He's also got a presentation. So,
Kia ora. Sorry, I was getting mixed up because it was all.
Donaldson. Thank you, Mr. Wadu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. It was just regarding the funding update for Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre at the top of page 22. So I see Bay Trust declined.
Any reason why they declined?
Can you tell me what is the current shortfall and what is the strategy going forward? Can we go back to some of these funders and yeah, how far are we away from, what's the shortfall, what's the target? Refresh me on that, and what's the strategy to try and strike that?
Sure. So the target for stage 1 is 18 million. We're currently sitting just under confirmed 10 million, with a further 8-9 million that we will apply for between now and next June next year. So the majority of that funding will know the decisions by mid to late November. Construction will start April, May next year. But one particular fund, which is the Lottery's Significant Project Fund, applications don't open that till November this year, closing in February next year, and the advisory is not till June next year. But we're pretty confident that we will have 80-90% of our funding secured by the end of November.
Stuart, any reason why the Bay Trust declined the 300,000? Was there any reason given? Most unusual.
Yeah, look, my understanding was the issue was around the lack of support for moving from the 630 odd seats that we have now to 1,000 seats. That was the feedback that I had from Alistair. Alistair did say that they may have another look at it. I'm meeting Alistair actually in November to talk about that and also potential funding for museum.
So just qualifying your answer, are you saying that their view was yes?
I think this is confidential. I have applied through Bay as well to certain things, and they say that we cannot discuss the item once turned down or approved. So I just draw that to your attention. It is a condition of their
I wasn't
requirements.
aware of that.
I'm not complaining about
No,
it.
no.
I'm just pointing it out, please, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, I'll save you any further embarrassment. Obviously, they're going to be talking to Bay Trust again. Yep. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, did you have another question? Any further questions? Yes, we'll take Councillor Maxwell, Stuart, we'll have a break, and then we'll come back and so that your presentation, then we'll move on to Rob Piketty's presentation and the Sport and Rec. Councillor Maxwell.
Tēnā kōrua. Just on the funding update there, the application to Bay of Plenty Regional Council for 2 million, when do you know you might get a response from there? And is this some special fund, or is this an annual thing that they look around the Bay of Plenty and distribute?
No, this is to the Regional Economic Development Fund. And they originally were going to hear the case actually today, but that's been deferred now till the 27th of September.
We'll adjourn for 10 minutes. We'll be back at 10 past 10. Thank you.
Devastating.
the report. So, Stuart, I'm in your hands in terms of your presentation, Henry, and we'll have it specific to questions regarding issues raised in the report. So, open to you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Chair, the one other thing we were just going to touch on, which isn't in the report, is the recognition of the library and the Westpac Business Award finalists who were announced the other day. They're a finalist in 2 categories, which was around the Bilingual Business Award and the Innovation and Disruption Business Award. So really cool to see them
Would I be
up in
correct,
lights.
Henry, that other people have nominated the library, not us?
I think generally speaking, you put your own nomination forward. So I would think, it's a fairly extensive process, which this isn't a process where others put you forward. You do the work yourself and put it forward.
Thank you for that update, Henry.
So we will jump into the museum presentation, and really this is just again part of wanting to give you a regular update of some of the significant work that's going on. And look, we're as conscious probably as you are about the public interest and the concern about wanting to see progress. So, we're in exactly the same boat, but the message we need to be giving you really is, look, there is a huge amount going on. We need to make it more visible for you. And so that's part of what we're going to do. It is complex, but we're on track. And so I'll hand it on to Stuart.
Thanks, Henry. Right, now really just to really highlight our key goal at the moment, and that is really to have cranes, scaffolding on site ready for construction in July next year. That's what we're focusing on. Without going through too much detail, you can see our progress at the moment. You can see where we are. So we've just completed the seismic strengthening assessment. We've completed the concept design phase, and we're now working through the various aspects of the developed design, and that will progress into detailed design over the coming months. An awful lot, as Henry said, has been done, and without getting into the engineering and complexities of it all, as we sort of uncover one part of the museum, it provides challenges for other parts, which is not surprising. But and I can talk about some of those key ones a little bit later in the presentation. Right, so just recapping, so obviously when the museum closed after the initial seismic assessment, we knew that the building was below 33%, and then there was this huge gathering of information, the 3D scanning of the building, review of all the existing documentation, structural assessments, looking at the original geotech, particularly from the 2010 extensions. The invasive investigations, they took quite a time. Once, obviously, we had those. We were in line with many other of the other earthquake strengthening building projects around the country, so we sort of had to wait a number of weeks for results. And then finally the DSA that came out in August last year, they had the building at 19%. And then we've been working through the structural design peer reviews, the initial architecture design, and a lot of dialogue and toing and froing with various aspects of the build with Heritage New Zealand. All right, so key milestones that have really been achieved in this last little period is the architectural revisions made to the access. So you remember in the plans that we presented a little time ago about the air bridge of potentially future-proofing the museum with a connection into the sports dome. We've worked through Heritage with that, and we have an alternative solution for that. Access to the basement, so with the grouting, sorry, the not grouting injection, the shotcreting of the entire underfloor of the museum meant that all the services under the building, water supply, pipes, sprinkler systems, all need to be lowered by about 150 mil, which meant that access to the basement for visitors, although it's been a huge part of the museum for some time, is simply not possible without digging deeper. And we felt that digging deeper was a risk for us, particularly around additional heat and geothermal and H2S. And then due to the structural elements within the cafe, a mezzanine floor was considered, and quite a lot of toing and throwing about the shape and the placement of that with Heritage New Zealand. Mechanical, electrical, hydraulic, and the fire engineers have all been engaged, and we've had some initial reports from them. And they've highlighted a number of compliance issues for us, all coming up to date with current code. And I'll talk about those shortly. A big one here for Cat's Tame is really the logistics around de-installing and planning of the galleries, so the last remaining of the large tonga within the museum. And of course we've engaged with experts, conservators from Auckland and Te Papa, and that's required a lot of crate making, reinforcement of some of the floors to extract the tonga, and also the removal of some of the internal walls there. That work is due to be completed by, I think, the end of October is where we're at with that, so we're almost in the final stages of the museum completely stripped. Initial QS cost estimates for the structural still has been received. Structural still is obviously it's a large component of the cost, but there's also an element of risk here with world steel prices, and fluctuating New Zealand dollar could impact the cost here for us. HIVAC services, the initial report has been received, and this is really critical for our museum. Environmental control, being able to mitigate H2S is critical for the museum in terms of it being able to house our tonga, and particularly in loans from other institutions. It's critical that we get that bit right. You've heard us talk about the lightweight roof tiles. So we now have a composite roof tile sample, and I'll just show you that shortly. This has been reviewed by the design team in Heritage, and looking at a number of different products. Lightweight roof tiles is not new in the world, but certainly in terms of replicating a Marseille tile has proved a little bit more challenging for us. Finally, after a number of meetings and debates, that Heritage New Zealand agreed in principle to the lightweight roof tile for us, which is really critical because current weight of tiles on the roof is 237 tonne. Because of the nature of our environment, the glaze on the tiles corrodes away pretty quickly with our geothermal environment. And then during wet weather like we've had recently, those tiles will absorb moisture and almost double in weight. So it gives you an idea of the challenges here. Now, fortunately, with the lightweight roof tile at dry weight, it's about 40% lighter and doesn't absorb moisture. So, after a day like today, it's a significant saving in weight. And what that does mean for our structure is that it requires less steel and less evasiveness in the original heritage fabric. Resource consent is complete and is now ready for consultation. And we've we engaged a new architect in terms of DPA, who've partnered up with local firm Carling Architects for the architectural components. We really need to have a look at that because of the specialist nature of the heritage components and the amount of work that needs to go to, particularly in the detailed design phase. There's hundreds and hundreds of drawings that need to come out of this. We're in the tender process, or certainly expressions of interest in the market right now for project management and early contractor engagement, which will be a critical aspect in terms of the next phase for the project. Early contractor involvement really ensures that we have what we're suggesting and how the methodology of building, that it is actually has covered off the buildability factors. Key challenges, as I mentioned, the lightweight roof tile that has been a bit of a challenge. So I do just want to touch on some of the challenges with the existing tiles. So the existing tiles, I think, were replaced in the 50s on the heritage building. Now those tiles have had ongoing issues in terms of the factors that the moisture they take on after wet weather, but as they get older they become brittle, and what we've seen over the years is that they crack. They also, particularly after strong winds, and we've seen a lot of those in the last few years, is they tend to lift and break. That has meant a really high cost of ongoing maintenance of maintaining those tiles, and given health and safety now basically requires a crane to come in, to replace those tiles, and we're losing on average probably 30 to 50 a year, depending on the weather conditions. We do have a solution. I've got a sample here to show you, because those current tiles have one fixing point and they really utilise the weight of the tile to hold them in place. The new design, this composite tile rubber compound, requires 4 stainless steel screws to fix it. So we've got about 160,000 of those to put in when we get going. But it is a lot robust. You can walk on this product if necessary. The way that it's secured to the building really will improve the water tightness issues that we've had almost since that building's inception. I'll just show you just briefly. So you see the detail in the Marcel tile. And the fixing points, you can see there's 2, they'll actually be stainless steel screws and nails in this sample. For the public? Right, thank you. So you will see here that the fixing mechanisms, there'll be 2 screws here and 2 screws here, which means that these tiles won't flex, where at the moment we've got the lifting that goes on and the braking. In the final design, these will be powder coated to match, so you won't actually see these, and they'll be recessed. Yeah, this is just an sample. Now, these tiles have been up in Yellowstone Park for the last 6-8 months, being tested in terms of their resilience to H2S. And then we've just got to work through the final texture of the tile, because this is actually a smooth 3D printed tile. And then the colours. So we will look at probably a 3-shade variation. Those tiles get mixed up so that when you look at the tile, it'll look basically exactly the same as we've got now. Right. More than welcome to have a look at that.
And Stuart, while still on the tiles, Mr. Chairman,
yes, just a quick comment while he takes his seat.
Yeah, you said it'll be 237 tonnes. So with the new tiles, what will that weight now become?
About 140, I think, somewhere around there. Yeah. All right, just moving on to the next one, which is the high vac. As councillors have been aware that the high vac has been a challenge over, once again, a number of years for its reliability in that environment. And we do have a solution for that as well, and I'll talk a little bit about that next. We've spoken about the mezzanine floor changes, covered walkways, and access to the basement. One that turned up for us, which was a bit of a surprise, with the viewing platform and the additional fire egress. Look, I'm really fortunate. We've got a great team of people. We're extremely solution focused. We've had some challenges and curveballs thrown at us, but we just work through them methodically. No idea is a bad idea, and we're getting the results that we're looking for. Oh. Thanks, Carol. Right, so we spoke about the floor layout changes, so access to the basement. So currently access to the basement was through the northern galleries and the same stairwell as access to the roof space. That will no longer be possible. So what we've been able to do here is actually use the southern wing access, which is a bit of a benefit here because we never were able to provide disability access to the mud bath basement, and through this plan we're able to do that. So basically taking people down through the basement, past the existing staff facilities, and then into a clear-covered glassway exterior of the building that connects it into the mud bath basement. Now this will provide access for all, but it also means that the structure of the underside of the museum, which would have been lost otherwise, this provides that opportunity for us. And also the glass-covered walkway is an option under consideration at the moment, and we have finally got Heritage Across on this. Is really to look at that future-proofing, that additional potential exhibition space and or education facility at the sports drome, and that's a connection there. The other one at the top there is the cafe mezzanine floor. So the structural steel that you see there has to happen regardless. So we really wanted to potentialise the seating in the cafe there, and so this the mezzanine floor actually sits over where the existing changing rooms was, because there used to be a pool in this area, and the pool would sit underneath the exposed steel. The next layout, which was I spoke about fire egress from the viewing platform. So in the fire review, we discovered that, in fact, the maximum number of visitors that we could have there at any given time was reduced down to 10, which wasn't going to work for us operationally, and it would have been a shame if we'd lost access for the public to those spaces. So we've had to work through an alternative egress, which comes down, for those that are familiar with the building, where the honeymoon pool area. There is a small space behind there. We've been able to get these stairs in there and then exit basically into where the current Rotorua Stories Theatre is. But these access actually need to come through from one fire cell to the next fire cell. So there's been quite a lot of moving backwards and forwards to make that happen. The next one is the critical structural steel. Look, there is some engineer speak here. I'll try and just avoid that. Basically, the challenges we've had in here is around seismic lateral loading. So this is a moving of the building from left to right or backwards and forwards. The vertical strength of the building is actually pretty strong, but obviously unreinforce those concrete walls. We need to insert a significant amount of steel in there, and that's been a challenge, particularly around how we create the membrane across and under the floors of the mezzanine in the main atrium. That's been a real challenge for us. And then really finally, the next key milestones is really to finish our test production of the actual tile and approval from Heritage based on the texture and the colours. Approval from Codemark. So Codemark is the authority that approves, tests products for the construction industry. Obviously, this is a product that hasn't been used in this form before, but is used around the world in other products, from drain covers to all sorts of different things. The product itself is not new, just what we're using it for. Submit a resource consent. There's obviously funding discussions with central government, which is a critical one, and then contract in those project managers and those contractors for ECI. Complete the develop design stage, and then really start on the detailed design stage, and aim for that July 19 start date. Happy to take questions.
Just a couple of questions from myself before I ask Councillor Donaldson. One of the things I'm delighted with is the fact that you're targeting local contractors who will then provide work for subcontractors, which is great for our local economy. I see you mentioned Carling Architects. It's just one component of this of this huge project that's going to have a huge effect on the designers, specialist advisors that you are using our local people is to be applauded, and you're to be supported on that, Stuart. When can I see a crane lifting steel into reinforced walls or roofs, or when can I see a crane parked up at the back or the front?
I would say that's likely to be in July next year. The scaffolding is probably the first thing that will go up. Now, Digital Council is an idea of the scale that is likely to take several months to install. The whole building has to be wrapped as well. So, it's quite a feat because the scaffolding actually requires engineering as well. So that's when you expect to see it. July next year as our start date.
The other thing, some of my colleagues around the table won't be aware, but I was on the working party for the Energy Event Centre, and our experience was with RDT, who were the on-site advisors. They actually encouraged us to make the steel purchases as quickly as we could because of the state. At the moment, it was exactly the same. The state of the New Zealand dollar, this government and the Reserve Bank are trying to push the New Zealand dollar down, so the cost to buy goods overseas is going to be more expensive. I mean, it's a lot better for our exporters, our farmers, and that the dollar is low. But is there any forethought with your working advisory group to look at the option of purchasing steel in advance of it being required because of the pricing?
Look, we have discussed that because it is an element of risk for us. A 10% increase in steel swinging the New Zealand dollar could add $1 million to the project overnight. So we have been speaking to Thomas. I mean, we're certainly not in a position to order steel right now, but we could hedge funds if that was a desire.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Congratulations, Stuart, on an excellent detailed presentation, and it's easy to see what keeps you awake at night. But for me, the slide on milestones showed that Council hasn't been dragging the chain on this project, that it has been a number one priority, that certainly for yourself and your team, to crack on with a number of key milestones being achieved each month through this year. So that's very encouraging. And my only question was, could you remind me why it is we need a resource consent? Is it because of the changes being made inside the building, and who do we apply to? Who makes the decision and issues that consent?
Right, so the resort, because it's a heritage building mainly, is the main issue. So obviously the parties to that, obviously Heritage New Zealand. Obviously this sits on Ngāti Whakāui gifted land, and obviously iwi, that's part of our consultation process as well, and they're certainly part of our project. It's really the structural integrity of and the evasiveness of what we're doing with the heritage is really the key consent requirement.
Mr. Chairman, actually Dave has asked the same sort of questions. The only one I'd had with the resource consent, it would be going out for national resource consent, not just limited.
No, it'll go to council here.
Okay. Yeah. And one other that concerns me, of course, is the Heritage of New Zealand. You have had some discussions already with them?
We've had hours of discussions with Heritage. They're a partner in this with us, so they've been on the journey with us right the way through.
Thanks, Stuart. It's nice to hear that they're saying they would like to be partners, or assume they're partners, because that can be very, very difficult. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well done.
Tēnā tātou. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few questions, Stuart. First one about the tiles. What's the life of those tiles?
Right. So these tiles come with a colour fast guarantee of 10 years, which is pretty consistent with the industry standard, and a 20-year guarantee for the life of the tile, which is also consistent with that. There will be, as with any product in our environment with UV, there will be some discoloration, but that'll be consistent across the whole roof.
Just in terms of the supplementary, Mr. Chair, just in terms of how you're going to change the roof with the tiles, put the new tiles on, has there been any thought, I've got my project hat on now, any thought of staggering the change, I suppose, or the repair or the replacement, just so when, you know, in years to come, you don't have to shut down the whole place to change it, was it?
Yeah, so the project plan is to replace the entire roof in one go.
Okay, another question. You mentioned about the shotcrete. I don't know what it is. It doesn't sound right to me. You mentioned you had to lower the pipes?
Yeah, so...
Or services?
The underside of the museum is, you will remember, is that the floor structure is unreinforced pumice concrete. Right, it has less strength than your fence post at home, basically. And so what happens is, with the design of the piles and the bracing mechanisms of the arches under the museum, is that rather than trying to insert steel into those things, you use a product called shotcrete. So it's a mesh membrane that goes over it, and you spray concrete with a resin in it that basically locks the entire floor, columns all up, that gives it its strength, which is about 100 mil. And then all those services that sit there now, so data, gas, water, all need to be lowered. Yeah.
Okay, it sits right with me now, thank you. And one last question, sorry, it's just about the steel. Might be a stupid question, but has there been consideration as to the makeup of the steel and considering our environment?
We have spoken about that, and obviously the quality of steel is really important to us, and so we'll need to have, you know, some good quality controls in place for that. Steel will probably come from China. There's a 6-month wait on steel at the moment, so we've got a little bit of time, but obviously its treatment, its powder coating, it will be critical, as is the choice of nuts and bolts we use. We'll obviously be looking for high quality stainless steel.
Kia ora, Stuart, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Stuart, because now with the thorough detail that you're giving us and that the public out there to us have been saying, come on, Council, what are you doing? Get on with it. Well, as Deputy Mayor said, the timelines are there and they'll know about it. Am I allowed to ask this question? Heritage New Zealand, why were there long delays on their part as to why on the tile one? I mean, it's logic to me, it's reducing weight, all that kind of thing, but what were their main concerns, if you're allowed to tell me?
Look, I don't know whether it was long. It was a really good, robust debate, you know, and this is around, first of all, that the tiles that are on the museum now are not the original tiles. They were replaced, as I mentioned before, in about 1950. The original ones were actually black, and they had a curve on them, and they failed dramatically, which is why they were replaced. So there was some debate whether we went back to the original tile, or whether or not we would use the existing tile. And obviously, you know, the Marseille tile has been part of the museum for for a long time. It's been, you know, in our photographs, the colour. You know, to go back to black, for instance, I think the community would sort of struggle to understand why we do that. But also that the texture of those tiles and how they weather over time gives the building its character. So that was some of the debates we had. And obviously, really, you know, the construction part, the lightweight, is hugely attractive in terms of what happens internally. So it was a trade-off, really. It was saying that, look, let's get a product that actually will be more waterproof for us over long term, reduce the maintenance costs, and less invasive infrastructure that needs to go inside the building.
Just one question on a fundraising point of view. I just wondered how many existing tiles were on the roof so that they could be purchased by locals as a fundraising effort.
I knew you were going to ask me that. It's 36,400, give or take.
Yeah, that might flood the market. I'd have it. Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Stuart, for your very, very in-depth summation this morning. I just have a query as to, and you may not be the right person to ask, but what's our insurance status on this building at the moment?
Councillor, my understanding is we're still waiting to finalise that and waiting to hear.
Mr. Henry, I asked this question some 12, 18 months ago regarding the status of our insurance, and I understood that we had, that the cost of insuring the Rotorua Art and History Museum was absolutely prohibitive if you compare it in terms of your local home. That there was an excess, that once the excess, that the insurance companies would kick in once the cost reached a certain level. But just to clarify, because it was Thomas who actually answered my question at that time, the costs of insuring the museum fully from $1 would be absolutely prohibitive for a building that's 100 years old. But Thomas, are you able to help us again on this video? Thank you.
So thank you, Chair. Just reinforcing what Henry Weston has said. So the claim is still active with our insurance brokers. You will recall that because it's a heritage building, that the deductible, being the portion that council has to first pay, is $5 million, which is 10% of the value of the building. And as we are working through this, obviously keeping track of the costs that we've incurred to date and the costs to fix damage versus the cost of fixing structural issues that were already inherent in it. When that quantum goes over 5 million, then we can be in a position to pursue that claim.
Bentley, do you want a follow-up question? Okay, thank you. I think that's cleared that up. Councillor Gould?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 questions. Will we have a better idea in April or May next year as to what the cost of the project of restoring the museum will be?
Councillor, we will probably be in a position to have an estimate for the building next week or the week after. That will be the initial estimate. And then as we work through those detailed design phases, and those costs will become closer to the reality, which would be next year. Yeah.
One question. Is this document public knowledge or confidential knowledge?
No, that document is public knowledge. Yeah, you're more than welcome to share it.
Well, Stuart, sincere thanks for, as Councillor Bentley and others have said, thank you very much for a very extensive report. I was just saying to the Chief Executive Officer, you know, with this calamity that had occurred, thank God we held on to you as the person to lead this project and lead the reopening of it. I just hope we're all around and re-elected, hopefully, to be there for the reopening, which I think will be a massive event that Te Arawa, Heritage New Zealand and the people of Rotorua and the Bay of Plenty should celebrate in a grand way. So thank you very much, Stuart, and for your report, and I'm sure my colleagues would endorse my comments here. So thank you very much.
Kia ora.
Thank you. Henry, while you're there, can we call over Rob to move to page 27 under 8.10, and here again, whilst Rob's taking his seat, I'm delighted with the format of this reporting so that you know exactly if a ratepayer rings you up and said, oh, what's happening with Amarana or Acacia Bay boat ramp? All the detail is there, and you're able to respond in a positive way. So, Rob, welcome. I understand you've been at the Murray Land Court this morning and got some good news for us in terms of that.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, just trustees for the Kawe Cemetery Trust. So we have successfully appointed 2 Ngāti Whakāwe's trustees to that trust. So we're back up to a full component there. So that'll be great to get that running with our meeting in 2 weeks. So happy to take any questions on any parts in the report, probably other than Sanatorium Reserve, which I've got a presentation for, and also some of the work on Hamarana. So if there's anything else, we can probably deal with that, and then we could...
To take questions on those 2, everything else but those 2 excluded items, which is the Sanatorium Reserve and the Hamarana Reserve Development Plan. Are there any questions? I have just one, Rob. Oh no, I'll wait till Hamarana because it's the toilet block at Hamarana that I've had the questions on. Okay, are there any other questions anyone has about boat ramps and all those sorts of things that we've all been questioned on? Mr. Wadu?
Sorry, Robert, you're right. I did have a question. Page 32, I think it is.
32?
Oh, is it 32? Just around the tree inspections. What was it 8.106? Might have got it right. So is there any update, the progress reviewing the fatality last year? So it sort of went cold and we didn't hear too much after that.
Arawa Street. Yeah, okay.
The Arawa Street Oak situation is still with the coroner, so that's being processed through that process there. The situation with all our tree inspections is that we had a significant number of trees in what you might call high use areas, you know, our larger street trees and things like that. They were all inspected by an external arborist who came up from the South Island. We've also, we've had some advice from that, which has identified a few pieces of work that were required, but everything else is ticking along. We've also just in the process of contracting another group of inspections for a significant number of street trees that we're going to be targeting. You know, we do have an inspection regime with our contractor to keep those things going, but we've just realised that it's, in terms of making sure we're meeting best practice, we want to get a really good benchmark, so we're going to go ahead and get that done.
Just supplementary, Mr. Chair. Given that the tree that fell over and caused that unfortunate kaupapa, there's one right next to it. There was one right next to it. Are there any immediate plans to sort that one out too, or are we just going to wait until something happens?
So we're working with the landowner on that one. Immediately post the Rotorua oak event, that tree was inspected. There were no concerns identified, but we're going to go a step further and do a more detailed assessment, and then the action will either be a crown reduction, which is, you know, just reducing the weight of the tree essentially, or removal depending on the advice. But the advice we've got at the moment is the tree's safe. We totally understand the concerns, so we're going to do more detailed assessment, and we'll take our advice from that. But certainly we've got no concerns on the basis of the best advice so far.
Hold it, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walu. These are the Spencer oaks, aren't they, Henry? Commonly known as the Spencer oaks.
Yeah, the one that fell was
Spencer oak. Okay.
Yeah, the one beside it is what they call a tulip tree.
Okay. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. And my question was in regard to the aquatic centre. So thank you for the report there. That looks very positive. And I was just looking with interest at the future bookings for events. Did I catch correctly a news item on sport, TV1 Sport the other night, that the World Underwater Hockey Champs are coming to our aquatic centre? Are you aware of that one? Sorry, no, I'm not aware that it is the World's. It may be a component, like a Masters type thing. I'll find out for you and get back to you about that.
Have you any? Because I saw it as well, and I thought, whoa. And it was also on Radio Sport, because they were talking about how someone can hold their breath for 40 seconds and whack a hockey puck for 40 seconds and then come up for air. So I know we've had them before and they've been very popular. And at the event, they actually have a huge TV screen, so you can actually see what's happening underwater. It's quite exciting. So if we do get them, Henry, yeah, I encourage everybody to come along. Any other questions? Okay, Rob, if you'd like to start your, are you starting with the sanatorium one first? Okay.
Thank you, Chairperson. So what I'll do here is I'll work through a sanatorium reserve presentation. So basically, it's our significant gifted reserve that sits in what's commonly called Sulphur Bay.
It's a very ecologically significant site. It's got some, because of the geothermal nature there, it's got some rather rare plants, and it's actually got a very rare colony of gulls, which sort of surprises people that seagulls live there, but it is quite a unique inland colony of gulls. It's got a raft of problems. It has been used historically as a dump site, through the 50s and 60s. And I think pretty much as a result of that, it's got a huge range of plant pests. Arrow bamboo is one of the significant problems in there. It's got a whole lot of pest animals, and so the ecological restoration plan has been around for quite a while. It was sort of triggered after the fires of late 2017 that we really needed to do some work there, and it went through the long-term planning process and clearly was supported by council. So the first phase is an ecological restoration program, which has been planned out by Wildlands, who are Rotorua's, national leaders in this area. And basically there's significant work to do in terms of pest plant control. There will be that animal pest work. There's going to be a limited amount of revegetation. One of the things with the reserve is that it has got its own seed bank in the soil, and planting external plants in there in a geothermal environment aren't going to do as well as letting the natural ones regrow. The program is $488,000 over a 5-year period. The council has put some 355 into that, and basically the second phase will then be actually looking at what else we've got in the reserve. And it's around reconnecting people in terms of, as you'll see there, the links for cycling and walking, all those sport and recreation facilities. There's a number of leases in there, mixed gym, archery, hot rod club, all sorts of things like that. The wastewater treatment plant is in there as well, which is getting a lot of work happening on it. There's a council storage area, there's a composting site, there's the old BMX track. And all that second phase of work, we need to work with the community to understand exactly what the needs are in there and how we can actually package that whole, how we can package the whole area up and work out just what's the best outcomes for that reserve. So I'll quickly roll into this. Just wonder if we've got a laser pointer on this. So I'm going to, work on this. I'll flick between both screens. But there's a wildlife area and a significant ecological area here, a wildlife at the top of the reserve, and the main ecological area is in here. Yeah, sorry, I'll flick backwards and forwards if you like. Wastewater treatment plant, sports fields, BMX and composting site is all this area in the middle. So wastewater treatment plant, composting site, BMX and sports fields across here. So that's the reserve comes down the Pūringa stream and runs up around the top. So down the Pūringa stream and up around there. So as I said, the trigger for the program was the fire that occurred in 2017. This was an arson situation. We do get fires through there probably every couple of years. This was one that got away certainly before they normally get attended to. And with the sulphur in there, there is some issues around the fire. Actually, you get sulphur burns, which keeps going for a long period of time, so they're quite difficult to manage. But as you'll see, this fire took out a reasonable area of the reserve. This is taken looking back towards the poly pools from sort of over the composting plant. Okay, the next image. This is the work done by Wildlands. So they've been in there and they've done an ecological assessment, and this is an image that has got a lot of facts and figures there, but it shows you basically the weeds and the issues that we have with how many pest species are in there. As you'll see, a lot of the sites have got arrow bamboo, but there's a variety of blackberry, broom, gorse, willows, wattles, gums, there's wandering dew, there's thistles, there's just all sorts of things in there. And a lot of those species probably were introduced at the time that it was a landfill. This image here actually shows, if you could just flick the next one for me please, Carol, you'll see that's taken sort of looking in a northwards direction from basically hovering above Mig's Gym, or a little bit sort of further north than Mig's Gym. Those red circular areas are the bamboo stands. When the fire went through, it took out a very large amount of bamboo. But those are clearly bamboo, and Carol, the next one, you'll see, you know, there's significant areas of pines, there's all sorts of exotic species through there. So wildlands, the reason that this has come before you is wildlands are actually starting next week, and this is the image from the bay looking back in towards the racecourse, obviously. And with the fire site now a year old, there's actually quite a bit of native revegetation already occurring in that fire site. Regrowth of the kānuka. There is some regrowth of the bamboo. Unfortunately, that's coming back as well. But now's a really good time to hit it. So wildlands are going to be starting in there next week. They will be basically assessing what areas they can get to for mechanical weed control. Taking machines in here it's a sensitive area, and it's also got some places that you wouldn't want to be in there with a mulching machine or something like that. So it'll be a combination of machine and hand, but the big start is basically working on the bamboo, and that'll be really the focus for the first 12 months. In this, sorry, if you could stay on that one, Carol. The old dump site, I'm going to use this one and then come back to the other one. We have aerial photos of the, back to the previous one, Carol. Oh, no, sorry, other way. That's it. Aerial photos in the 50s show that the dump site sort of extended into this area, but we know in the 60s it's pretty much come right out around. So it started in here and then it just pushed further out, and it's pretty much come around here because Councillor Donaldson and I did some work in there a while ago, and there's a whole raft of bottles and all sorts of stuff in this area, and then there's tyres from 1950s trucks down here. So bottles in here and truck tyres all down here. So, you know, a lot of that material is being covered, and the intention is not to go and try and excavate that because in that sort of environment that may actually cause more trouble than it's worth. There is migration of landfill stuff that comes up to the surface at times, and basically that'll be an ongoing tidy up to keep that sort of thing going. A big part of the work as we roll forward with this is also support from, we've had support from Lotteries Fund for this, and so they've contributed $80,000 for the first 2 years to help this work, and also the Bay of Plenty Regional Council have signalled that they are prepared in terms of the environmental restoration of the area and water quality and things like that to contribute towards this as well. So a couple of good partnerships potentially firing up there. We will go on to the next one. We'll take any questions about sanatorium.
First question I've got for you, Rob, is who and what is Wildlands?
Wildlands are an ecological consulting company. They're based in Rotorua. They've won national awards, in fact, not even international awards for their basically their native restoration programs.
And do we have any partnerships in terms of this significant ecological area with DOC, iwi and Forest and Bird, or Friends of the Sanatorium Reserve? Or, I mean, how are we engaging locals in the redevelopment of this? Because I think it's an area of ownership that the locals would gravitate towards. I don't know, I might have that wrong, but I think the Rotorua people are pretty proud of Sulphur Bay, and there's an element of the community who will do anything to, from an ecological point of view, to reinstate it and get birds back in there, wildlife, etc., etc.
Yes, sorry, I probably skipped that. We have, in the lead up to the program, had a relatively comprehensive stakeholder working group that we've been talking to, including iwi and DOC, of course, are a significant partner in there. And it's extended to even the leaseholders and the sports clubs that use the reserves, and that, you know, there's a whole raft of stakeholders there. We had a meeting on the 27th of August prior to the work starting, where we invited everybody in and had a workshop in the committee room, and Wildlands presented their ecological restoration program. And then we also talked about the need with that group to actually set up a sort of a longer term working party, especially when we get into those other areas of the reserve other than just bamboo and exotic pest control. So we're gonna need to have some very strong community partnerships and connections when we come to making decisions around, you know, BMX track site, Pūringa Park, what's happening with composting sites and things like that.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Rob, for your presentation this morning. Pleasing to hear that you've got Wildlands on board already, and their knowledge on ecological and expertise in this area is almost world-renowned, certainly locally. I'm just wondering if there's an awful lot of, I imagine, donkey work that's going to be involved with restoring or weed eradication and so forth. Have we got Infracore involved in any contractual sense under the supervision of Wildlands? Because I feel that, judging by the way that they handle the city gardens, they would be very, very proud to take on a project such as this.
Yep, through you. We haven't got Infracore immediately involved in the first phases of the research on actually working out where they can, where Wildlands can do hand and machine work. We certainly will be using Infracore when we get into the track type understanding of, we've got a lot of tracks in there. We've probably got more tracks than we need. We want to make some tracks better, and we probably want to close up some tracks. So I would say there's going to be a significant role for Infracore with that. And when you say donkey work, that is correct. And Infracore would be you know, trained in these sorts of environments. But one of the things about this space, and that's a, you know, a question may come up around, okay, community getting involved and all this sort of stuff. We do have some quite careful health and safety issues that we've got to undertake in that place. So we will be involving not only Infracore but other community type groups once we have identified specific areas that we can, you know, work with particular groups without any health and safety problems on the thermal crust.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, thank you for your question regarding wildlands, and also the positive comments from my colleague, Councillor Bentley, because the concern from a cultural perspective was raised in a hui that I was in recently, is who were these people and what were they doing on this particular sensitive piece of whenua. And I know that they've worked in partnership with Tūhoi on a number of their projects in the Eastern Bay. So, you know, they are at the head of the game when it comes to ecological restoration. Rob, thank you also for the answer in respect of the caution around volunteers getting involved in what can be in parts a dangerous environment, because there was a question from a consultant here just this week, bringing a large conference here next year, who wanted to put some I guess paying it forward or giving back sweat equity into a key project, and this one was raised as an opportunity, but with the caution that it needs to be carefully managed, any volunteer input onto that site. So I acknowledge those answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, from memory serves you right, the airport worked with Wildlands when they first got started on ecological impact on the airport. My question, please, Rob, is the stakeholders. Have you identified any major stakeholders as yet? And I think there was a date, if I could have, was it August the 27th? For the stakeholders to make a submission, is that right?
We had a meeting on August the 27th with, we sent invites out to a list of 60 or 70 identified groups, our key stakeholders in there, iwi, DOC, and then a number of sort of reserve user groups, and of course, and when I say iwi, we've got adjoining iwi as well as Ngāti Whakaui with the gifted lands area, and we not, I suppose, when we kick off the phase 2, which is understanding all that, what's going to happen to it once we've actually just done the pest plant work. When we kick off that phase 2, that's when we will go through quite a comprehensive workshopping process to understand it. So we're not going through we will go through an engagement process rather than a consultation process. We'll be fully engaged with a wide range of users.
So the public will be notified?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any further questions on the Sanatorium Reserve? Having been born here and brought up here all my life, Henry, this has been one of the areas of Rotorua that has been severely neglected and abused over many, many years. And to see what you're doing here, Rob, and with the involvement of 60 or 70 stakeholders, which you've just mentioned, is just fantastic. So I think this could be, in conjunction with the cycleways and some of the other linkages that we're doing, the Pūringa stream up through the Waka Forest, etc., etc., I think this could be a significant development in what was a wasteland, which we used to cringe at when we were kids, having the trucks of rubbish dumped there and all the leachate going. So that's what's polluted the lake, not only sewage, but the leachate from this tip that was there for 20, 25 years. So I'm delighted with it. So,
and just
it
is just worth saying that this is a reserve ecosystem of international significance.
Value.
This is a really significant place ecologically. And last comment about wildlands, I know everyone said it, but I think they were the winners of the Westpac Supreme Award last year. So Willie Shaw and Sarah Beadle, who a lot of you will probably know, and they're fantastic.
Final question from Councillor Gould, and then we'll move on to Hamarana.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. You mentioned stage 1 at 488,000. When we know what will stage 2 cost? Because you've got a question mark on your slide.
It is a good question, and we're going to need to understand what the outcomes are from the community and the working group seeking for that they're seeking on that reserve. I mean, there's a whole raft of other information we've got coming around sports field supply and demand and that sort of stuff. The wastewater treatment plant, the work that's happening there. What are we going to do with various sites around that? BMX are changing, so we sort of, over the next 12 months, we'll start to clarify some of those pictures, and then once we've engaged with that community, we will have hopefully a better idea of what that question mark means, and then how we might go about finding that.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. Can we now move on to Hamarana Reserve upgrade, please, Rob?
Thank you, and through the chair, only a few slides here. I suppose this is one of a sort of main reserve improvement projects that we've been running. It's actually, it started about 2 years ago with the engagement process with the community, HARA, which is the local community association out there, Hamarana and Awaho ratepayers, and Ngāti Rangawiwahi. So those three groups were met with, HARA and Rangawiwahi mainly were met with collectively. They both agreed that yes, they wanted the same sort of outcomes for the reserve, and identified a number of actions that they would like to see happen. We then did some work on those actions and consulted with the wider community through the council's engagement portals, and advertised in the shops and letterbox dropses and online, and ended up with a clear set of priorities from the community about what they wanted to see there. And that was mainly around access control, so making sure that people can't get on the reserve and do donuts and dump rubbish. Walkways through the reserve. At the moment, it's a very long reserve that's pretty much all grass, and there was certainly a strong wish to be able to get through the reserve a bit easier. Shoreline erosion is an issue, and we're going to deal with that with a separate project because we actually have lakeshore erosion as a piece of work that we need to do on a number of Rotorua reserves, and park furniture and playgrounds and improving it. So it was a very community-led priority setting process that went through about 18 months of work before we actually started doing things, and the program kicked off in early this calendar year, and we started with the track work. So basically, the top left-hand picture there is taken from the boat ramp and was basically what it used to look like, looking east. And then the bottom left-hand picture is now the new track that's going in. So that starts, the two trees that it's going around there, you'll see on the right-hand side of the top picture. And it proceeds off towards the shop. And along the way, we've got a number of furniture installations. Strong support from the Lakes Community Board. That's one of the Lakes Community Board picnic tables that they've contributed towards this program as well. And basically the key part of phase one is getting the path, the furniture in and doing some improvements around the playground. And then phase two is working on bollards and actually controlling where people can get to and things like that. And I think the next image, yeah, so that's taken from above the toilet block that Charles is going to ask me about in a little minute, I think. And that's basically the path as it's come from the distance, the background, and is working its way down towards the Hamarana stream mouth. So that park will proceed through the whole reserve. There's sections of concrete, but the majority of it's lime chip. So happy to take any questions on that one.
Yeah, just one question. I've got two questions. The first one is the enhancement of the boat ramp, Rob, because the boat ramp, which is almost opposite Ward Road, is highly used, very, very highly used. But that's a comment, but the question I've got is, what is EBOP doing? They're responsible for foreshore in the lakes. They're responsible for degradation of the lake edge. So where are they in this? I mean, we seem to, as Rotorua ratepayers, seem to subsidise a lot of expenditure at the Port of Taronga, and there's no cross-subsidisation back to this. This is a significant reserve that is used by nearly every school at Christmas because it's such an idyllic spot. The other question I have is the issue of the toilet upgrade, because when they do have the Prima 1s and 2s from Rotorua Primary go there for their Christmas picnic, of course the wharepakis are, oh that's toilet by the way, the wharepakis are really used extensively, so and sometimes they're not the best. So there's a couple of questions there. Firstly, EBOP's involvement, and secondly, the toilets.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We're working with EBOP on consents for shoreline protection. It is our responsibility as the landowner to protect our land. Yep, and so like it would be with a private residence if they own to the lake edge. So we're working through them on consents because we've got the same situation at Hannah's Bay. You know, we've also got areas at Ream Street as well where we've got shoreline erosion, and in terms of resilience against environmental change, we need to make sure that we're doing the best we can to meet the needs of that shoreline protection. So EBOP are a partner in this in terms of helping us through the consenting process. Now, in terms of the toilet block, this image is taken from above the toilet block where the playground is. and that toilet block is up and running. It's the one that's got the art on the side of it of the lady, you know, the ballerina or whatever, dancing around. So that toilet block is of a reasonable standard. It's a tier 3 block, I think, which is what sort of that reserve requires there, and is on a regular cleaning regime. And if there are issues with it, then we need to talk to our contractors about making sure that's fine. 400 metres behind the very tall person taking this image is another toilet block which is close to the Hamarana stream mouth. That's the one that we basically have closed. We are working with both the community out there possibly and talking with Rangawiwa about the future of that toilet block, because it does have value. It certainly has value over the peak summer periods. But it may be one of those toilet blocks that are potentially a bit like the Okaraka situation, where if we had a community-driven desire for looking at maintaining a space that could be used by responsible campers, like the Boys Beach sort of model, then that would be a suitable site for something like that. So we have been working with the community on that. It's closed. It has been open last summer over a peak period where it was opened on Friday night and left open for the weekend, cleaned and then closed. So we just have to manage that one quite carefully.
There was just one other question, if I may indulge. The Hamarana Play Centre use that annually for their craft market auction, and they have a Sunday in, I think it might be January 3rd or 2nd week in January. Just wondered if they've been consulted, because that path I can see goes straight through the middle of where they were actually holding some of their stalls. So I just wondered if have they been engaged through Jerry Douglas?
Jerry has been very involved through HARA as well. So I don't know if they've been involved directly, but I'm sure they would know all about this.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Rob, for your update on this. With the type of work that seems to be undertaken in this instance, and further to Charles's question, would ideally suit for Infracore to get involved. And I say that in that if Infracore are involved, you're involving a whole heap of people that take ownership, and they do this sort of work with a great deal of pride, having had experience of more than 30 years in this sort of field, and that they also take ownership, which means that further down the track you have got a whole heap of eyes and ears which are heavily involved and very proud of a project, and they will make sure that you know, or the relevant person knows, if anyone is seen to be abusing it or dumping it, looking to the future.
Yeah, thank you, through you, the Chair. When we tendered for this work, there were a number of components to it. We went through a lowest price conforming tender process, and I think, if I recall correctly, that Infracore was interested in this work. The way that it's worked out in terms of the budget that we've worked for, we've basically had another contractor do the job, and Infracore has been doing a lot of the vegetation work. So they've picked up a pile of the tree work, and there will also be an ongoing maintenance program around the vegetation, probably the shoreline restoration, and in terms of looking after the path, but they didn't get the contract for the original path install.
Thank you for your report. Why don't you get the community involved in, say, buying trees or shrubs and planting that particular area? Then they'll take more of an interest in it and make certain it's more maintained, have a higher standard. And that way there you'll probably save a little bit of money from the council. Instead of council paying for shrubs or trees, the locals will provide, shrubs might be down one side of the fence or something like that just to give a bit more secluded area or make it a bit more vibrant?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. The community has been involved down the other end with a significant replanting program on the stream mouth there at the bottom of Fryer Road. And once we get the shoreline protection done, we will be getting the community involved in some of the other work along the lake edge. Between the shop and Fryer Road, there's a whole lot of properties that overlook the reserve there, and there seems to be less desire from the community to plant that up with trees, which is understandable in terms of a view shaft situation. So we will be getting them involved in certain areas as we go through that revegetation plan.
Thank you, Rob. Rob, you touched on it earlier, so there won't be vehicles going onto the reserve at all. And looking at that slide, can you tell me about the parking situation? I hope it's going to be used a lot in summer, but what's the parking situation all along there?
Thank you. Through the chair. No, there will be areas where vehicles can go on the reserve.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, if you drive past there, you'll see cars parked down by the lake and people enjoying picnics and things like that. And we don't intend to take that away. There's significant problems at the western end with fly tipping, where it gets up on the bank where the old house sites were, where basically people can get up away from visible, from sight lines. So those are the sorts of areas where we will be restricting vehicle access. Through the midsection of the reserve, there will still be places where the path gets very close to the lake edge. There will still be places where vehicles can get down onto the grass and get out and have a picnic if they want.
And will they still have the barbecue places?
Yep, the playground and the barbecues and those are still there.
Good.
Yep.
Kia ora, e te tia mana, kia ora Rob, kia ora anō Henry. If you would indulge me, Mr. Chair, just want to say it makes me really happy to hear in every thing that we've presented today, what our kaima have presented today, there's been iwi involvement right from get-go. I think it makes a big difference. And so I just want to encourage the council, tātou katoa, kia kaha tunu. In regards to Hamburana, I know mine and Uncle Trevor's whānau out there been going on for ages about getting something done there, te whakātāua I te rā wāhi. And I'm really very pleased that it's actually happening, and it's happening in a way where everybody's involved in that he pai te rā. But if you would indulge me once again, I want to sort of go back and just make comment about the sanatorium. I should have probably said it then, but when that was gifted, it was given in pristine condition. And it really makes my heart, kai te kapakapa te manawa there, we're going to try and get it back to that point again. So, he rawe tēnā, I just wanted to acknowledge that, because I know he piki mahi, even with the bamboo, that's such a pest. Don't burn it, because it comes back twice as hard. Yeah, and so kia kahara koutou ki te rā mahi. But you did bring up an important point there, and I think you did too also, Mr. Chair, about the rubbish and on the shoreline. And recently we've had a lot of rubbish come up into Ohinemutu, through a Pika Bay there. And I'm just wondering what the role, what's our role in that, and how are we going to sort of, is it an EBOP issue or is it a council issue? Because it really is kaore te pai.
From my experience of living on Rotorua for 20 plus years, and also things like the clean-up that Councillor Donaldson and I did with the Rotorua Trails Trust and other groups around there, a lot of that rubbish is stuff that ends up in the lake. Basically, I don't believe it's stuff that's coming out of landfill sites and stuff. It's basically what gets washed through the system and ends up in the lake. And unfortunately, fortunately, probably because it's not a sea, it eventually ends up back on the shoreline. Now, that's probably a behaviour change. You know, we need to make sure that we're educating our community that that's where the stuff ends up. And if we want clean lake shores, then we need to stop dropping stuff on the streets, I think. You know, and the waste team are doing a lot of work in that area, and with all the recycling and things like that that's happening now, we would hope that we can work our way into a better place where we've got less of that turning up on our shorelines.
Ka pai, and I just want to make reference to the group no Hirimutu. And they're quite active. We're quite active there, and you know, cleaning up and making things kia tāhua mai anō. However, you know, I just want to put out there: is there any way the council or you, Rob, in particular, that can see a way of potentially helping or contributing something towards these groups that are actually doing it on their own?
Rob, if I may interrupt, I've engaged Stavros because I've been contacted by that group. I contacted Stavros, and they're going to provide the equipment, Hy-Vee, you know, spades and whatever equipment they require. In terms of monetary, no, but in terms of equipment, yes. And I'm just waiting for Nathan to advertise the fact that what time and date he's going to do that bays clean up, because there is, and I think that's your experience too, Rob, there's huge community buy-in. If you call people to action, they'll turn up. And with black paper bags like you did with the Trails Trust, Rob, and people will just turn up, but they need to know in advance if the weather's right and things like that.
Monty's got
but Rob, if you'd just like to answer...
I just want to clarify why I asked Rob. I wasn't too sure whether it was a Stavros Copa or a reserve Copa, but that's all. Kia ora.
Not a problem.
Charles, Monty's got a response too.
Can I just say, from past experience, when there's been organised events like that, we've said, yep, we can help. And so it's a matter of knowing that and talking with Stavros around how we can help. I mean, with the one that we did in the reserve, we managed to get the bins and all that sort of stuff sorted out. So it can be done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question and one request, if I could, please. Under the district plan, what is the zoning of that area? I think
it'll be zoned recreation reserve.
I think you need to check it out, because a lot of the reserves in Rotorua now be changed to residential one.
We'll
so
check
you
that, yeah.
need to check it out, please. The second one, please, Mr. Chairman, is there any accommodation points for freedom campers? Because I know there's a lot of freedom campers over the summer, just love to pull into there. It's something that's unique to New Zealand to a certain extent. It's not necessary foreigners. I'll leave that question. Yeah, I'll leave that question as it is. And the other thing, Mr. Chairman, I think you'd be quite close to your heart with this as well. The barbecues that were put in there was actually initiated by the late Councillor Johnny Lepper. And if they should be taken out and renewed or whatever it is, I'd like to see a plaque that's put in, recognising his thought that he had probably back in the 70s when he got into it. I think there's 3 barbecues. Yeah. So that would be greatly appreciated from the historic part of it. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
In regard to the question around freedom camping or responsible camping, as it's now trying to be directed to, certainly we recognise that's an area that has a desire for it. We have had significant camping events there in the past where wrong information's been sent out and everybody's turned up. We're working with the community on the future of that, because it is a community that examples where it's worked well, like Okaraka at Boys Beach. It's a community-led initiative, and so it's an option that we may work with the community. Well, we will work with the community to see whether they want to take that option up.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Rob, that I'm well aware of, and our family's done it themselves, and many of our Māori family do the same thing. They have family reunions there because of the sacred side of the land and the mana that it actually creates when you have your reunions. So that's, you're going to get people wanting to put tents up and stuff like that, in respect to that. It's been traditional. Thank you.
Yeah, and Bob, but most of those are only on a temporary basis. They just put them up. For
Yeah.
They just put them up for the day, and they're not sleeping overnight or anything like that.
Gazebo or something.
Councillor Maxwell?
No.
Oh, you've had yours. Councillor Donaldson, finally.
No, look, I was just going to back up the comments of Mr. Pete Kethley in response to Mr. Waru, and that was the rubbish ending up in the lake. And last year, Councillor Hunt and I went with a retired school teacher for a kayak, and inflatable kayaks down the Utahina from Springfield Road to the lake. And you only have to paddle down there, or try to paddle down there, to see where the rubbish come from. As soon as a heavy weather event hits, it's flushed out. So whose problem is it? It's a community problem. And, as community leaders, I think a bit's being done, but we could do more in encouraging people to use the wheelie bins that are provided rather than, chucking it in rivers.
Yeah, a lot of it though, to be fair, having lived on the Utahina through my childhood, a lot of it is, stuff blows into the rivers as well. But you said it's a community problem, but as I've said to Mr. Waru, the community have a solution. They want to be involved in cleaning it up. So and that's why I sought Stavros' support. He's right behind it with the Clean Rotorua, beautiful outfit, and they will support Nathan and his friends down there. I think it's a great initiative, and I'd like to be there to help them if I can. The question?
Oh, just in response, just the reason I'm pushing sort of like ohinimutu, because although yes, it does go to the river, it ends up in one place. Arai te wahapu o ohinimutu ruapek, so it ends up ngā tāngata o ohinimutu anake, kai te whakatika, so it ends up for the ohinimutu community that always ends up has to clean up. Yeah. And so, for wider discussion, tēnā tātou.
Any closing comments, Rob, in terms of Hamarana? Yeah, would someone like to move the presentation on the Sanatorium Reserve and the Hamarana Reserve be received and endorsed? We move Mr. Waru, seconded Councillor Gould. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Against,
carried. We have a mover and a seconder to the main motion, which has been passed. It now behoves me to declare the meeting closed, and thank you very much for your contribution. We've had a very good meeting in terms of information sharing, and I just want to thank the staff, particularly Henry and Rob and Stavros and the others that have made presentations. So thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, Councillor Bentley. We were struggling for a quorum if you'd left.
So who's going to come down and help me down? Ohinimutu, I'm going to go down now.
You and the rest.
Okay. Yeah.